All right, we're right at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll go ahead and get started here. So I do see there's still some people joining us. This is Luke Lothamer. I will be beginning the Sage Intacct user group here. We'll have quite a few different presenters here today. I want to start off, if anybody's having any connection issues, please call Leah Peters at the number there on the slide. For those of you who would like to receive CPE credit for today's presentation, could you please email Leah at her email address there, and if you could just enter in the subject line that it's for CPE credit, and we'll be sure to get those certificates to you. Those of you who might have attended user groups in the past, or if you're new, there are ways to participate. We don't typically open the phone lines for people to ask questions. We do allow questions via the chat box there on the slide here. So if you want to ask a question at any point, feel free to type it in and push send. We will be monitoring those questions along the way, so we'll pause here and there and bring those questions up. If we happen to have quite an influx of questions, we will be sure to answer all of them. It just may not be here on the presentation. So if we don't get to your question, we will follow up here after today's user group. On today's agenda, we're going to begin with a few housekeeping items, and then jump right into the 2024 release updates. From there, we're going to hit bank rec and bake feeds, grant tracking and billing, platform services, reporting, and then the last three items here on the slide, those are going to be additional. We would like you to stick around. There's some great material there with Data Blend, VersaPay, and Martis budgeting. So if you haven't heard of any of those three, we encourage you to stick around, and we feel like they could certainly benefit many of you here on the user group today. Many of you have probably worked with one of us here on the DWD team, but for those of you who aren't aware, we are made up of the individuals here. I'm Luke Lothamer. I'm the project manager. To the right of me is Adam Westcurtis. He's the Intacct practice manager. And we have Logan Lemon. He's going to be a system consultant. Brad Prather, system consultant. Nathan Lichty, system consultant. And Cassie Rock, system consultant. So for those of you, you may have worked with one of us or two of us on an implementation. Just to make you aware, there are a few of us. If you ever need assistance and you're needing some help, feel free to reach out to any of us. Also, for any of you who are new to the user group or new to DWD, we are a division of the CPA firm, Doolin, Ward & Dewald. It was established in 1939. We're located in Northeast Indiana, Fort Wayne, and we are made up of right around 90 staff. The technology group is made up of mostly software consultants. A few of us are CPAs as well. We also consist of network engineers, and we have been nominated to Accounting Today's Top 100 VARs, as well as Bob Scott's 2024 Top 100 VARs. You can see those there at the bottom right of the screen. One update we wanted to make you aware of here that will go into effect immediately. If you're looking to add new users, you may notice this message on the screen here. I do kind of want to highlight just a portion of it. When you go to create a new user, if it exceeds your current user count, you are going to be billed automatically. And in the past, there has been sort of a courtesy notice where we can kind of ask and say, did you mean to add this user? Well, Sage just change that, and they will be actually looking at that daily. So if you need to add a new user, we would highly recommend that you reach out to one of us on our team. Just confirm what your user count is, and if you're looking to exceed that or need to add a business user or an employee user, we can check on that pretty quickly and make sure you're either A, not going to exceed your user count, or if you need to, we'll get that invoice prepared for you. So we're making you aware of this because we don't want to have any invoices triggered automatically and catch you by surprise. So if you could reach out to us, and then we can help you with any of those additions. The DWD Technology Group, we do offer a variety of software solutions. We are primarily a Sage house. You're here for Sage Intacct, but we do also offer Sage 100, BusinessWorks. We work with MIP Fund Accounting, Sage 50, and then Sage FAS Fixed Assets as well. So if you ever know of anyone who needs support or is looking to move to Sage Intacct, feel free to get them in touch with us, and we're always happy to help with Intacct or any of these other solutions as well. We also provide network services, so you've got a few options here. If you know of anyone, or if you and your organization are interested in a managed IT security plan, data backup services, Microsoft Office 365, or managed IT services, we do offer those as well. So again, not just software solutions, we offer these network services as well. All right, now we're going to start to get into the primary topics of today's user group. So I'm going to kick us off with the 2024 release updates. And throughout the presentation today, we're going to have some poll questions as we go along. And I'm going to start us off with the first one, and you should see that pop up here on your screen momentarily. Okay. All right, so for those of you, I'll just reread the question here. Are you familiar with the Sage community and Sage ideas? And the results there, 59% yes, 41% no. So I'll just kind of give you an idea. This could be a great resource for those of you who are not aware of it. I'm going to pull up Sage here, my demo environment, onto the screen. So I removed the slides. As we go along the presentation, feel free to follow along with the slides. I'm going to primarily work in the software. And related to that question, Sage Community and Sage Ideas. If you're not familiar with it, you can come down to, or you can click the home icon in the upper left, and then in the bottom right here, you have a community option. So if you click on that community option, it will require you to sign in. So if you do not have a login to that, which will be separate from Intacct, you can create your login and whatnot. What I want to focus on is the community and the ideas. Community is an area where you can go out and you can ask questions to other Sage Intacct users. So right here, if I scroll down, you're going to see other organizations who have asked questions, and then as an organization, you can answer those questions, or like Sage Intacct representatives will answer questions too. So highly encourage you to use the community as you see fit. In addition to DWD, it's a great resource. Sage Ideas. I wanted to bring this up because it kind of ties into my portion of the release updates. These ideas are essentially enhancement requests. You can come out here and you can post an idea or something that you feel like might improve the software. And so you're going to see many of these out here: popular ideas, recent ideas, top all time, and you can vote on these. So if you find something that's related to an enhancement request you would like to have added, you just have to click this up arrow. It'll add your vote to the list. And then what you want to look for, I mean, as time goes on, I'll show you here. This one in particular says it's an open idea, but it's on the roadmap. So Sage does pick and choose. You know, if they get a good following on an idea, they'll look at adding it into the software. So this one's basically, it's going to be added at some point. It's on their roadmap. There's just no time frame. So these are where all of the release updates begin. Many of them start as an idea, and then people vote. And eventually they're added. So there's always new ideas that come to us that may not be functional or a functionality in the software. We strongly encourage you to go out there, create your ideas, and then hopefully one day they'll be added to the software. All right, so 41% of you, I would say, use that community as a great resource. Submit an idea if there is anything that you would like to have added. As we get going with the 2024 updates, you can see those release updates here in this home screen, 2024 release 3. Typically, Sage does 4 releases over the course of a year. And you can always go here to read the release notes to see what all may have been added into the software. So I'm going to show you some of these that have been added over the past year. And I obviously won't get to all of these, but I picked a few of these that I thought might apply to many of you. I would strongly recommend you guys come out here and look at this, and a new release update will be coming here toward the end of the year. So let's go back to my demo environment, and we're going to start with updates that apply to accounts payable. So there were a few that I think makes life a little easier for many of you who may work in accounts payable routinely. So the first one's going to be they have made voiding payments easier and quicker. So here, when we come out to AP, many of you may have been used to coming to your check register, and let's go ahead and click View, and then clicking this Void button here within the check register. So they have actually changed this. You no longer need to do this step of it. Instead, you come out here to Accounts Payable, Payments, Posted Payments, and then if you look to the far right, you'll now see a Void button. So instead of having to go through the check register and then do this step, you come right to the posted payment screen. You can click on the void button here, and it brings up that same screen as before. So then you provide what date you want to void that on, maybe a memo, and then click submit. That part of the process hasn't changed. It's just now they have allowed you to do that void step here within the posted payments. Okay. One other item here that's kind of related to the posted payments, if you apply credits to payments to vendors, you can unapply those, and you'll notice that this top row here in my posted payment screen has an unapply button. So if we look at this payment in particular, you can see the total amount that was billed, $600. There was a $600 credit applied. If you needed to unapply that, we would go back here to unapply and think of it essentially as a separate void option, because we're saying we want to unapply the credit. It's going to ask you what date do you want to unapply that as of, and then it's going to put that bill back out there so that you can pay it without the credit portion of it. So that's another update that they made. So they've added the void option here, and then if you have any payments where credits are applied, you can also unapply those credits at this step in the process. Okay. All right. So those two are somewhat related. I'm going to stick with AP here, and I'm going to jump over to an actual bill to show you another update here. So I'm going to act as if I'm going to create a new bill, and we're going to select a vendor. This update here is for any of you who may have vendors that have multiple contacts. So maybe, let's say, if you had McDonald's as your vendor, there are many McDonald's restaurants out there. They might have separate locations. In this case, we've got Jason's Delight or Deli. And so let's say Jason's Deli had multiple locations here. Those of you who are familiar with this step, you see many contacts out here, not just for Jason's Deli or Jason's Delight. This has been a concern for quite a while, and they have actually updated this so that you can restrict it to just locations or contacts tied to the vendor. If we duplicate my tab here, we're going to go out to the AP configuration. So if you are interested in making this change, you're going to have permissions to do this, or have someone in your organization who has permissions to do this. Go out to AP configuration and then scroll down here. There's a contact settings. So right now it's saying show all contacts. In our case here, I want to restrict it to contacts related to the selected vendor. We're going to go ahead and save that. Let's go back here. We're going to act as if we're going to add that bill again. Jason's Delight. Now you'll notice there's only one pay to, one return to. So if you have vendors that have many contacts or many locations and you need to pick and choose who should be billed or who this payment should go to, you can now select that. You can restrict the listing so you're not seeing all those contacts, which was kind of a pain in the past. So definitely a great update in my mind. All right, we're going to take a peek at bills that have approvals tied to them. So another update they've made, they have created the ability to recall bills that have been submitted for approval. So if I come out here and let's just go ahead and duplicate a bill. Let's change our date. Okay. And we're going to go ahead and submit that. All right, now you'll notice my top row here, this is the one I just submitted. You have a recall button. So if someone in AP submits a bill for approval and they notice, well, I coded that wrong, I input the wrong department, they can then recall this and it's going to put it back into a draft state, and then they can come out here to that bill, make their change, and then resubmit it. So previously, when you submitted the bill, you had to wait for the person who's approving to decline it, and then they could make changes to it. Now they kind of have put that power somewhat into the hands of the person submitting it. If they notice they made a mistake, they can recall it and make that change themselves. All right. Somewhat related to the AP bill approvals as well, Sage has added a notification email that goes out to the people who have submitted AP bills for approval. So I just submitted that bill here, and then when the person who approves it does that step, I would receive a notification that looks like this. So it tells me account payable bill you submitted has been approved, gives you the bill number, the amount, and just kind of a brief email to tell you that what you've submitted has been approved, and then obviously it can then be paid. So that was not an option previously. So if you wanted to have that, many of you already have this turned on, but if you come out to the configuration, we're going to scroll down to the approval portion. You just have to make sure this email notifications is turned on so that those will flow through the system. You also may need to make sure that the user has the notifications turned on in their preferences. So if I come up here to my user, my preferences, and scroll down, you have these requests in the email notifications section. You'll just want to do a spot check of your or that particular user's preferences, and just make sure this box here with bill is turned on. So Those two things just need to be enabled before that can be an option to have the submitters receive those approval notifications. All right, so we're going to move away from accounts receivable or accounts payable and onto accounts receivable. One update that they made to accounts receivable is related to discounts. So I'm going to come out here to receive payments, and we're going to act as if we're going to post a new payment. Select this one, we'll say add and close, and then looking across here, those of you who are familiar with receiving payments in AR, you just have to define how much you're paying, and then previously the discount was based on certain terms or what is related to the customer. They've made it a little more flexible to say, okay, we're going to discount it. Maybe you're covering shipping or some sort of fee that's being charged, and you're going to say, I want to apply a $250 discount. You can now just type that discount in there. It doesn't have to be based on the term, a percentage, if they pay within a certain amount of days. This gives you flexibility to specify the discount that should be applied to the customer. So they have made that update. If that sounds like an option you want to have available to you, all you have to do is, again, someone with permissions to do so, come out to the accounts receivable configuration, and we're going to scroll down, not quite halfway. The enable functionality section, you can see enable custom discount. This checkbox right here is going to allow you to do what I just did. So if that seems like it might be a good fit for your organization, you'll want to have somebody come out to the AR configuration and turn that on. I'll kind of skim over the next update here because it relates to the one that I just showed for AP. So if you have customers that have different contacts, different locations that are set up, you can restrict those options using this setting right here. Restrict to contacts related to the selected customer. So that really trims that list of what can be selected in addition to that customer or related to that customer. So that is related to the AP update that I just showed you. You can also do that on the AR side. One other update related to AR that they have added over the past year is draft payments. So I'm going to venture back to here, and let's say I'm ready to post this payment. I've got my discount entered in there. Previously, the only option you had was to post it. Now, let's say I'm not sure about certain parts of this payment. We haven't received all the information. I'm going to go ahead and save this as a draft. I haven't entered my payment amount yet. Be sure to do that. And then now we'll go ahead and draft that. Okay. You'll notice that many of these payments here on my screen have been posted, and you can't do anything with those except for one here. So I've got the draft. You can come out here, edit it. If you needed to update the discount that we applied previously, you can come out here and change that. And then when you're ready to post, you can go ahead and post that. So they've allowed the ability to draft that payment, which was not a functionality in the past. One final AR update for you here today. And let's go ahead and start a new payment. And this is going to be related to paying multiple customer invoices with one payment. Many of you may not have this specific scenario, but for those of you who do, this previously wasn't available. So you can come out here and you can say, I'm going to pay multiple customer invoices with one payment. let's say we received a check-in for $2,000. You'll notice this payer name. This may not look familiar to you unless you've used this multiple customer invoice payment option. You have to define who the payer is in this case if you're trying to pay multiple customers. So I'll just put multiple, but you might have a better fit for the payer in that case. Then you can come out here and you can say, I want to pay this invoice, then this invoice, and this invoice, add and close. Now they're all added together, and then obviously it's going to add up to $2,000 that we received. So you select, okay, we are going to pay X amount of dollars for these invoices. And so that previously wasn't an option. How it looks once it's posted, let's go ahead and click cancel on this one. And this here that I processed earlier, it tells you multiple customers. You can see who those customers are. You can see your total amount. You can see what invoices were paid, if you had any credits applied, and then the posting details or the accounting side of it. So if you have a scenario where you might need to pay multiple customers with one payment received, you can now do that. I will mention that if that's something your organization does, it's another setting you'll want to come out and turn on, because you're not just going to have that option out of the box unless this setting is turned on. So again, AR configuration, scroll down to the enable functionality. Right here at the very bottom, enable single payments for multiple customers. You'll want to make sure that box is checked and saved, and then you'll have the ability to do what I just did there by paying multiple customers with one payment. All right, so rounding out the updates here, I'm going to jump into just a few more to show you before we go on to the next topic of today's user group. So I'm going to show you a couple of GL updates that they've made. If you want to lock how far into the future you can allow your users to post something, that is now an option. So you can come into the general ledger configuration and scroll down here to this setting that says maximum number of unlocked fiscal years. Right now I'm saying from my last closed month, only allow my users to post 1 year out. Now within here you could say 2 years, 3, all the way up to 5. And what that looks like is, the reason I think this is a great update is if you come out to my journal entries, this here, let's say somebody in your organization enters a transaction and accidentally, again, not on purpose, maybe they are trying to enter 2024 and they accidentally put 2034. That's 10 years out from now, right? By that setting, having that setting in place, it then says periods are locked. And based on the last month that was locked, it's going to look at that and say, okay, 1 year out from there, this is preventing us from posting into that period that's 10 years out, and makes the user actually go back and say, oh, actually I meant to say 2024. And now you can see my entry is submitted, but that prevents users from accidentally posting that 10 years out, and then you're wondering how you got an entry in there that was so far into the future. So again, I'll go back here to the configuration, maximum number of unlocked fiscal years, 1 year. And moving on to the next GL, this update is for organizations who might grow in the future, and your GL accounts, let's say your GL account is 4 digits or 5 digits. Let's say you ran out of room on your chart of accounts and you need to expand that to 5 or 6 instead of 4 or 5. You can come out here to your configuration, this top setting, allow changes to account numbers, including length. And so many of you may not be familiar with this area where I just went company, setup, company, and accounting tab at the top. This is where your primary account number length is found. So in this organization, their GL accounts are 4 digits. And if I came out here and said edit, I could actually change that to 5 or 6. So that was previously not an option. You were locked into however long your GL accounts used to be. And now you can change that. You'll want to make sure that that setting's turned on, and then if you have the right permissions to do so, for those of you who might grow as an organization and need to expand that length. All right, I'm going to show one more update here before we move on to bank feeds. That's going to be related to reports, and I think this could be an important one to many of you as well. I'm going to come out here to just an example of a report, and I'll show you the update that Sage has made. So if you have reports out here that many users have access to and they can make changes to, maybe someone made a change and it's really affected your report and you're not sure what they did to make that change, Sage has an option up here titled View Version History. And so if you click on that, you can then see the different versions when they were changed, and then you can view or essentially revert back to an old version. That could be important, again, if you have multiple users going in and out of reports with the ability to change it. This kind of gives you a backup, if you will, that you can restore back to a certain version of that report. So could be important to those of you who have many users coming in and out of reports. And again, that's just in that More Actions menu and View Version History. All right, so I'm going to pause here and we'll see if we have any questions over the 2024 release updates.
Luke, we did have a couple questions, but for time purposes, I think we should answer those offline. And then let's move to Logan with bank feeds.
Sounds great.
All right.
All right, hopefully you're able to see my bank rec screen here.
Very good. Yep.
Hey everybody, so I'm Logan and I'm one of the consultants here at DWD, and I'm excited to share about some bank rec and bank feed functionality with you. Now some of this has been kind of out there for a while and maybe you're not aware of it, or maybe over time processes change and things start to make sense as Sage increases functionality with that. So I'm excited to share some about this, but I think we're going to start off with the poll question. And this first question is going to be, what do you use for your bank reconciliation process today? I'm curious to know and kind of take a poll of some of our options here. Nice. Thanks, Sherry. So it looks like we have quite a few clients on here that are manually matching items and some others that are doing import files with bank statement data. And also we have a couple people already using bank feed. So that's helpful to know. We're going to ask another quick poll question real quick. Hopefully this one's easy. And it's just going to be, are you familiar with bank feeds? So I'm curious to know who all might be familiar with bank feeds. At least 13% of people looks like probably are. See how many others are.
All right.
Nice. Perfect tie. So that's cool. So that's helpful to know. And I think maybe some of this will give you the opportunity to see something that you're not familiar with, or maybe how something you could grow into in the future. So I'm going to share my screen back to my slides here, and we can talk about what are bank feeds. So as most of you probably already know in some capacity, Sage Intacct has a great capacity for integrations in a variety of senses, which can save you a lot of time and work. And bank feeds are just one of these integrations. And so bank feed is a connection to your bank that automatically pulls transaction data from the bank, similar to what you'd see on a bank statement. So when you go to when you print off a manual bank statement or go to your bank account and view that, if you have a bank feed, that detail gets pushed over to Intacct. So feeds are first and foremost great for bank reconciliations, and that's a lot of times the context that they're brought up in. There's also some additional functionality that we'll talk about that can make feeds even more useful than just the bank reconciliation on its face. So here's some high view of the benefits, and the first one being it's automatic. So after you configure or implement the bank feed, the process of getting bank feed data into Intacct is pretty hands-off, and the data just syncs automatically. Sometimes that's daily, sometimes hourly, depending on what the feed looks like. Next, a major benefit is you can use matching and creation rules to automate different aspects of your bank rec process. And this is just a high view, so we'll kind of get into some details and demo of that in a little bit. So another benefit is data is always coming into your system depending on your feed, so you don't have to wait until the end of the month to start reconciling items. You can get a head start. You can do it on a weekly basis, just hit some easy items, or you can use it to assist on a daily basis if you're trying to keep cash reconciled. It just depends on your purposes, but a lot of times it's kind of nice to save some work on the front end instead of having to pile it all at month end. So lastly, some additional functionality that would be outside of the bank reconciliation is you can actually use bank feeds to help you process customer payments. And that's because you can see bank transactions coming in. You can tag those as an action item to apply AR payments. So there are a couple different connection types that are worth noting here. And as we saw in the poll, obviously you can do a no connection type and get along just fine and manually match out items, but manual on this page really just means import file. So it involves exporting the bank file, whether it's a CSV, Excel file, and importing that into Intacct. You can also use matching and creation rules that we'll discuss for these manual imports. So if you said for some reason that my bank isn't able to have a feed, or I don't want to do it, or I just want to try something first before I commit to a bank feed that maybe I'm not comfortable with, then an export import's a great option to try kind of get your feet wet into matching and creation rules. We have some clients to do that, as you noticed by the poll. But on the other hand, what I'm going to focus on a little bit more is those two in the green box that are indirect and direct, and I'm just going to kind of speak more generally about them, except for indirect is a third party, such as maybe you've heard of Plaid, that can connect to bank data. So they use a middleware, and Intacct will pull that data in for free because the middleware does the work. And sometimes results vary with this one. I've seen quite a few people using indirect connections that work just fine. So don't let that scare you off from trying. But also, what's available? There are many banks available with this, but if they're not, then you're kind of out of luck there. There's nothing you can build out for an indirect connection. On the other hand, direct connection, more and more banks are offering this as well, where you actually go to your bank and say, hey, we want to use an integration that you offer with Sage, and there's kind of an implementation. Sometimes it takes a week, sometimes it takes a couple of weeks, and this one is supported by your bank, sometimes has fees, sometimes doesn't, depending on your bank and your package. So we've seen a lot of success with these direct integrations as well. So my quick note here is ask your bank about fees before connecting, but don't let that deter you. Always ask. A lot of times for just a simple bank fee with your bank, it's fairly cheap. Now I'm going to do a quick demo to kind of review a couple items about what it looks like in your system to do. bank connection. So this is what a bank reconciliation looks like with bank feed, and you have two tabs here. You can see my mouse on the screen. You have your bank tab and the Intacct tab. When the bank feed starts, it will pull items into this bank tab. And currently, you see a few matched out here, but if I had all the items, it's pulling quite a few of them in here. I'm going to go back to match just to show you that I have a basic creation rule for a couple different transaction types. And what that has done is matched out these three transactions right here. And what that is doing is saying, in tax side, I have these three entries that match with my bank transactions for these three entries. And if we click the match button here, it's going to show us how it did that. So it auto matched it using a rule, and this rule matched the check number and the amount. So that's just a quick synopsis of what that looks like. If we were going to try to explore a little bit what bank feeds might look like for our organization, we can come out to subscriptions under the company menu, scroll down to Sage Cloud Services. This is free to turn on for you. So even though it'll say, warning, you can turn it on for free. You can click this checkbox to enable bank feeds if your permissions allow you, that is. Once you've done that, for your bank accounts, you will see a banking cloud tab pop up on your accounts. And what you can do there is click that. This is the one that's already connected, so I'll show you what this looks like. It just says status connected. I could disconnect it, refresh it, so on and so forth. Let's go back to one to show you what it would look like if it wasn't connected. It would just say, it would have this connect button right here, so you could click connect. This is probably one of the things to note, that if you're kind of exploring around with this, this is a good starting point. So you click connect, you explore, you say, okay, what's my bank? Maybe it's Chase. And there's some options that come up here. Now, if your option isn't here, that's where we could look at a direct integration, and I would encourage you to reach out to us or reach out to your bank or their website and see what their options are. But this is a good starting point right here. So I'm going to go back to my screen and we'll move on here. So a couple other things that are helpful overall, and this is to bank feeds, but also the import files. But on the topic of bank feeds, there are two main things that are really helpful to the reconciliation process, and that is an auto match, which is going to match a bank side transaction to an Intacct side transaction for you, so you're not having to manually do those. And the match fields here are document number, so that can be a check number. If it's AP, that can be the document number on a journal entry. That can be a variety of document numbers depending on the type of transaction that gets pulled in. Date, description, and amount. And their operators can be equals or contains. So a lot of times we'll see if there's a certain type of transaction that we want to make sure gets matched out. You can do something such as either the dates are going to match from the Intacct side and the bank side, and the document number and the amount will also, or maybe something such as just the amount and a document number in the description, or some combination here. So there's a few examples that are the most common, I would say. It's super helpful for giant check batches because you're going to have a document number, a check number, which is independent, and then an amount. So it can knock out matching check batches fairly quickly. Also, routine entries with predictable data tags, and what that just means is if you have something that always has the same description or document number and you just want to match that to the right amount, that's a great opportunity to save some time with matching out those. Groupings of transactions, Intacct can also take and say, you're going to group transactions by a document number, and it will sum to that total for you if it is able to. So, and if it's not able to, it just won't match it, but you can group by date or document number for certain types of transactions. And that can just save you a lot of trying to compute what items match for one deposit or how many deposits go into one entry. The last example on here is sweeps, transfers, and other deposits and withdrawals. Especially those of you with like a daily sweep or something like that. If the date, the amount, and description are all matching, or say you had a date and amount are going to match consistently, and you have a description that contains sweep, you could automate that and not have to match those out. So that saves you lots of transactions. This is a little bit what building a matching condition looks like. You just match the amount field equals amount. I'm going to move on to a creation rule. And what you can do with creation rules is it's going to bring the bank feed in and evaluate that based on a rule that you build. It's not going to build things that you don't want it to. And you'll have to give it guidelines about what fields you want to look at, what type of entry you want it to build. And there are limitations on what types of entry it will build. So these are going to be auto-create, are going to be helpful for transactions that you don't need to post to a subledger, so it won't do AP type of items, and transactions that are not already posted in the system. So you want to make sure that if someone's doing these entries, that you don't double entry them by creating some type of rule. An example of what would be a good use case for auto creation entries would be just basic journal entries to cash that happen on a routine basis, and you don't want to have to do that. Bank fees and interest earned are great items to match because they're going to have consistent descriptions. Other receipts and fund transfers, those are just other types of transactions that can be created if you chose to, if you had transactions that you want to build rules for. So that was kind of a lot of information, but we're going to use this last poll question as an opportunity to review some of the things and some of the benefits of what can you do with bank feeds. So look at that poll pulled up here.
Here are the responses.
Nice. Thanks everybody for your feedback on that. The correct answer is all the above, but if you got tricked into thinking that it was just one, that's okay too. You don't get graded. So thanks for listening to information on the bank recs here. I'm going to turn it over to Cassie now.
Hi everyone, I'm Cassie Rock, and today I'm going to talk about grant tracking and billing. Grant tracking can help achieve success by simplifying billing requirements and ease of reporting. It can automate keeping track of your grant expenses by marking eligible expenses for reimbursement. So to kind of highlight what I'm going to go over today, you can track grant start to end date along with their level of completion and much more. Once our grants are set up, you can mark transactions as billable, allowing you to generate AR invoices for those transactions. You can keep track of your grants through reporting and dashboards where you have options like comparing awarded amounts to actual expenses or grants that run across your fiscal year. So grants are the first thing I will go over, and we'll walk through the items below here on my screen. But I wanted to start by asking a poll question. And the question is, do you currently track any grants, whether those are in Excel or Sage Intacct? It looks like some of you do track grants, so that's good. So hopefully you can get some information on this module and it can be useful for your needs. So I'm going to switch over to Intacct now. And the first thing I'm going to go into is the grants. So in the application menu, you'll see this grant module. I'm going to go in here. And here you'll see a list of all of the grants that you have in your system. I'm going to go into this first one so we can look at it as an example. You can edit. When you go to add a new grant, this is what it's going to look like as well. So on this first page, you'll see the grant information, so the name of the grant, the category. So your category is going to be, is it a contract, capitalized, internal non-billable, or internal billable? So those are your options for that. You'll see begin date and end date. That's going to be important for tracking your grant and creating reports, because you can create reports from the inception date of the grant, so that will span across your reporting periods. And then you're going to want to also attach a customer. So whenever you do go to bill for this grant, it'll know which customer to bill for as well. And then you can add people. You can add a project manager, a sales contact, if that's something you want to keep up with in the system. And then on the additional information tab, This top section, this is revenue restrictions. So if you had any of that information you wanted to put in here as well, you can do that. This particular grant doesn't have anything in it, but it is an option here. And then the progress section. So if you want to see how far you are along in a project, you can add in completion percentages. So if as of today we were 80%, then we can put that in there and we can put notes. And then next time you could put in a next line and see what date your completion is. And then the billing section, that's going to be where you can set up terms and you can enter in the contract amount for the grant. And then you have dimensions. So this is going to be where you can code dimensions to the grant, and so this will populate when you go to enter in a transaction for it. And then I like to mention in the document section, this attachments. So a lot of times if you have any documents related to the grant that you want to keep track of, the attachments is a great place to do that. You can keep multiple attachments in here and come back and reference those. And then the other tab I'm going to go over is this grant summary. So this is going to give you kind of a financial summary of the grant and where it is. You'll see in this section here, you have if there's any deferred revenue, cash equivalents, revenue, and then expenditures, salary and wages if you are tracking those by grant, and then your net income. So this gives you kind of a brief overview of where you are financially with this grant. And then you have projection section. So if you're going to project your billing amount, you can put that in here. You can project hours for the project and then cost as well. And then you come down here and there's the hour sections where you can track hours. We don't have anything in this one, but you can see that if we did have anything coded there for hours. And then the bottom section, your employee accounts payable, purchases, any other types of transactions are going to be here to see what has been recorded as billable. Next, I'm going to go over the reimbursement and generating invoices. I'll show you how to enter transactions for reimbursement and how to mark the bills in AP as billable. I'm going to switch back to Intacct, and I'm going to go up here to accounts payable. I'm just going to use a bill as an example. And then I'm going to come into one that I've already entered, this one here. So here, just as if you were adding a new bill, you would fill out all of the information at the top. Nothing up there changes. So down here in this bottom section, you're going to see the coding. Depending on what you have, this would be different, but this grant is going to be the most important part. You're going to want to make sure you code that because that's going to be how you track the expenses. So you would put the grant in here. And then if this is billable, you come out here to this section here and you mark it with the check box if it's billable. And you can do that line by line. So if this second line was not billable, we could uncheck it and it wouldn't be marked for reimbursement when we go to generate an invoice. I'll leave that how we have it here. Once you have everything set up, you just submit or post as normal for AP. Next, I'm going to show you how to generate the invoices once you have all the expenses in, but we're going to do it for this one bill here that we have entered. So you're going to go back to the grants module and you'll see this generate invoices section. And this is where you can generate your AR invoices. I'm going to fill out this information. I'm going to say that we're billing for October 1st. So you have your invoice date, your GL date, and you can invoice by customers or grants. In this case, I'm going to go with grants. And I'm going to choose the one that we had on our bill that we just looked at. So then you'll see up here at the top, you can generate invoices. So if you click that, it's going to go ahead and generate all the invoices that are out there for this grant. I suggest that you hit the preview button. So I'll go ahead and do that. And then it's going to let you preview what expenses are out there and which ones you want to bill for to generate your AR invoice. So you see it pulled the header information from that first section that we were filling out. And it auto-populated the customer here. And that came from where you had put the customer on your grant. And then it's auto-populating the due date based on the terms. And then you come down to this section and it's going to show you any expenses you have out there for the grant. So if it's timesheet entries, employee expenses, accounts payable, purchasing, order entry, or GL transactions. I'm going to go ahead and select that bill that we were looking at that we entered here for 9/1. I'm going to uncheck these purchasing transactions since we are not doing that. So now that I have my 2 expenses here checked, I will hit create invoice, and it's going to tell me the invoice was automatically created for accounts receivable. So now if you want to go and view that invoice that we just created, you can come up to accounts receivable, go to your invoices, and you'll see it out here. And you can view it. And it shows those 2 expenses, and then they're going to the sales account now for our revenue. So next, I'm going to show report and dashboards. So for the dashboards and reports, you can see all information in one place. You can filter by your grants, and you have reports that fit your needs. So going back to Intacct, I'll come up here to dashboards, and I'm going to go to this role-based dashboard grant manager that's set up. So you can see here, there's different reports and pie charts and bar graphs that you can use, and you can make these all customizable to whatever your needs are. So to go over this first report up here, so this comes from financial reports. It's this grant position. Here you can see it's from inception to date. So from the start of your grant through the end of this year is what we have it set up as, and it's pulling your awarded amount, showing you revenue and expenses, and then how much remaining funds you have. So it gives you a good insight into your grants right here on your dashboard. This bar graph here shows you, your revenue and expenses by month. The green bar is your revenue, the blue teal color is your expenses. So it gives you a good idea of what you're doing each month as well. And then some of these other ones are kind of similar. So we just have revenue here and expenses here. This one is comparing awarded amount, which is tracked through the budget, versus your actuals. Come down to this part, this report here at the bottom, the grants with date ranges. So I think this is pretty interesting. It shows you when your grant begin date is and your grant end date is. So it's giving you information, over the period of time of the grant and not necessarily your fiscal period, so your fiscal year or calendar year. It's giving it to you during the time of the grant. And it's showing you the expenses from the time it started to whatever date you put here at the top of this report. So we ran it through 12/31. And then you'll also notice up here in the filters, I'm running it for just active grants. So only the grants that are active right now. You have the option to filter on anything, so you could run it for all grants. And you can set up as many of these groups as you want to filter by. If you just wanted to run it by one grant in particular, you can do that as well by selecting it here. And then you would just apply the filter. And then any of these components you see here on the dashboard, they can be used when we're building reports, and you can customize them to what you need for your unique business. Before we move on to the next topic, did anyone have any questions?
And we have some questions out there, but for time purposes, we're gonna go ahead and move on. So we will transition to platform services with Brad Prather.
Thank you. My name is Brad Prather. I'm one of the Sage Intacct consultants here. I'm going to be talking about platform services. I'm going to start my presentation like a lot of the others did with a poll question. All right, great. So it looks like we've got some familiarity with the custom fields, not so much with the smart events, and a little bit with the other ones. All right, so we are going to talk about all of those. All right, so platform services, what are they? It's a tool that can be used to customize your Sage Intacct. Some things to note: you must be a full administrator, you must have permissions to platform services, and you must have permission to any object that you are using or extending. Sage Intacct, when you hear the word object, that means think a table. So we're going to look at some of the different tables that you can extend or customize. So one of them, for example, will be the customer that we're going to modify. But wherever you hear the word object, think of the word table. Okay. First one we're going to look at is custom field. We use custom fields to keep track of data that may be unique to your business. And standard Sage Intacct doesn't have the field you need, right? So there's something maybe you're doing, again, in a master file you want to keep track of. Maybe it's a data entry screen you want to keep track of some extra data. Whatever it might be, you want to add a custom field to it. So what you're going to do, the first thing is you're going to determine the object, or again, the table that you want to extend. And then you're going to determine what field type. And here is a list of all of the field types that you can choose from. Now, during our training today, we will not have time to look at all of those, but those are there so you know what it is your options are, okay? Once you determine where you're going to put it and what type of field, you need to determine what we call some deployment options, all right? So is this field going to be required? Is it going to be hidden? Is it going to be active? I've always wondered why you might add a field and choose those second options there, but they are our deployment options. And then finally, you're going to determine what section that field appears in. So we're going to hop on over into Sage Intacct. We're going to look at a custom field. I've got a number of them out there, but the one we're going to look at is this sales type. So we're going to run through what we did here to create this custom field. First thing we did was choose that object. Again, what is the table that I want to extend or modify? If I hit my drop-down list, there's a list of all of the options that I have to make changes to, okay? I chose the AR invoice in this particular case. I'm going to click Next. This is what you would do if you were setting up a new one. This is the data type. You remember there was a list I had on that one screen, so we chose a pick list for this one. Good thing about a pick list is that you can control then what your user has options to enter, right? As opposed to just a text field where you're relying on users to type in particular text. This way you can actually control what they're selecting, okay? We give it a label, and then in this particular case, since it's a pick list, we add what are the values that are valid, okay? We have a couple other choices here. Do I want to use the first value as default? Do I want to sort it alphabetically? It will create this field ID for me by taking my name and capitalizing it and adding a underscore. Any description that you want to put there, you can do so. Next, here's my deployment options that we talked about. And then what section do you want to put it in? Now, in this particular case, what we did was we actually created a new tab where we added this custom field, okay? So I'm going to cancel out of that real quickly and go take a quick look at my AR invoice. And so if I go into an invoice, and I go to my edits, you'll notice now that I have a new tab here called Custom Fields, and I have my sales type. And I get my drop-down list, and this is where I can then keep track of, in this particular case, is this a new sale or an add-on sale? And I can then run reports based on that information once I start accumulating data. So that is my custom field. Let's go back here to my PowerPoint. We'll be jumping back and forth here. Next one we're going to talk about is smart rules. These are conditions that will generate warning or error messages. Okay, we can set this to respond to 3 different types of user input. This is in my data entry screens, all right, for example. There's one place I could put this. I can also put this in a master file, which is what I did in this particular case. But what's going to happen when I get user input? User input, what types of input do I have? One of them is an add. So anytime I create a new record in the object or table, this smart rule is going to run, and depending on the result, it's either going to generate a warning or an error, all right? Set, that means if any existing record is changed. So if I set the rule to check this when I change this particular piece of data, then it will go through the same thing and generate that warning or error. And then, of course, if I delete, I can also check the rule when the record is deleted, okay? Now, this next option or next bullet point is the one that's really pretty important. This is generated when the user input does not meet the defined condition, all right? So it's a little bit opposite here on your smart rules. I normally write mine going the wrong direction the first time. It seems like it doesn't trigger. And if it happens to you, you probably need to change your criteria. So if you did equal something and it doesn't trigger, probably means you should have entered it as a does not equal. Okay, just a little FYI there, a little trick there. You can use this to build compliance into your business processes and ensure that the business practices you want are enforced. At the end of the handout, there's a event link, rule and event cheat sheet, and that actually shows you how you enter the different criteria, because in Sage Intacct, it's a little bit different. It's not just an equal sign, it's a double equal sign, for example. So this cheat sheet, I highly recommend using it as a basis if you decide you want to start run or creating any smart rules. Again, we're going to choose what we want to modify or extend. Do I want an error or a warning? Just the difference between the two: an error will not let you continue what you're doing. You'll have to make the correction. A warning is simply that. It's a warning. You could ignore it and go ahead and continue what you're doing. So you decide whether you want it to stop what the user is doing or if you want it just to warn them. All right, your condition again, rule to be met so that the warning message is not sent. The text that you want to display, and then in deployment, what's the ID, description, and status. All right, so let's go back to Sage Intacct and let's look at a smart rule that I created in Platform Services. All right. So the credit limit is not required when setting up a new customer, but you want to make it be required so nobody can set up a new customer without entering a credit limit. So again, I choose my object or table. In this case, it's the customer. I'm going to make this an error, not just a warning. I want this to be an error so that the user cannot create a new customer without entering a credit limit. In this particular case, I'm just going to make it an add. Okay, so the successful will be if, or not successful if that equals blank. All right, that's why I have to remember which way it goes. What I've done here is I've said customer credit limit equals blank. Now, one of the things you can do when you're writing these, you have a button up here in the upper right called field lookup. So if you put your cursor in your condition and then go do the field lookup, you can check the field that you want to use, and it will automatically bring it into the condition. So you can build your condition using this field lookup, so you don't actually have to know what to type in there. So what's my error message going to be? Credit limit cannot be blank. Please enter a credit limit. All right, I gave it a smart rule ID. FYI, you cannot have spaces in your smart rule ID. So if you do want to have multiple words that don't run together, you do need to use an underscore. And then what's the description? This is a smart rule to require credit limit when creating a new customer. So let's just test this out. Let's go into accounts receivable. Let's go into customers. I'm going to add one. I'm going to call this BSP company. My additional information tab is where my credit limit is kept. I'm going to go ahead and leave that blank and try to save this customer record. There it is, my error message. Just tell me, you can see that it tells me that my smart rule was violated and it can't be blank. Please enter a credit limit. So just so you know that there's nothing up my sleeve and that this does in fact work, if I do now add a credit limit and save it, then it will save that customer. Let's go back again, kind of hop back and forth between my PowerPoint and Sage Intacct. Smart event, all right, very similar to a smart rule. This is triggered when a given event occurs or conditions are met. And this allows us to automate communications and processes. Typically, what I have used this for, found this used for, is to trigger an email when certain event occurs in your Intacct or certain conditions are met, okay? Very similar to what we saw in the smart rule. We're going to choose that object that we want to extend or modify. What do I want the event properties to be? In this case, what action do I want to take? Do I want to generate an email? Do I want to have an HTTP post or an API call? All right, which means I can actually even write some data or update some things within Sage Intacct. All right, so that's getting into some more, a little bit of programming behind the scenes for that API call. But one of the main things is to trigger that email. Same types of events. Is it when I add a particular record? Is it when I make a change to an existing record? That's what a set is. Or do I want this to trigger when it deletes, or all three? You'll see when we go in to set this up, I can actually choose all of them. What is the rule that is to be met to send that email? All right. The action properties are going to be dependent on what the action is. And then again, I'm going to give it an ID, a description, and a status. Let's go back into Sage Intacct and let's look at a smart event. All right, so if I scroll all the way down in the bottom here, I set up a smart event called Priority AP Bill. Okay, so what is that? Well, what I want to do is I want to send an email to a particular person when an AP bill is entered or changed that has a priority of urgent. Okay, so first thing again, as I always do in any of these I've set up, I choose the object or the table that I want to modify or extend. In this case, it's the AP bill. All right, what I want to do this time, I'm going to have the action be email. That's what I want to do. I want to email an individual. Okay. What events do I want to? And this, do I want to trigger that? In this particular case, it's going to be either an adding a new AP bill, right? And it gets a priority of urgent, or if somebody goes back into an existing bill and changes it to urgent, I also want that email to go out, okay? In this particular case, my condition is the payment priority equals urgent. The cheat sheet that you have at the end of the handout will show you the conditions here that you can use, how those actually, you type those in. As a reminder, if I put my cursor down here in my condition, I can go up to the field lookup and then browse or select the field that I actually want to perform that condition on. Okay, so again, you don't have to memorize or have a file layout in front of you to know exactly how to key that field in. Okay, use that field lookup in the upper right-hand corner. Who do I want to send the email to? In this case, I want to send it to B. Prather at DWD Tech Group. I can put a subject that's a combination of text and fields. Same thing here. If I put my cursor in here, I can go to my field lookup, select it, it'll drop that in the subject for me. Same thing in the body of the email. What do I want the body to say? This particular case, real simple, a bill with urgent payment priority was submitted by, and then I dropped in whoever the login ID was. Now this one you are going to have to believe me on, it does work. I've tested it a number of times. I've turned my email off for purposes of, so it doesn't go ding during this presentation here. But believe me, when I tell you, when I go in here into this accounts payable bill, and change my payment priority to urgent, and then post that, I am going to get an email in my email inbox telling me it's going to have that subject, that a bill has been changed to urgent, and then the body is going to say, bill has been changed to urgent priority by, in this particular case, it would be me, since I'm the one logged in. Okay? So that's a smart event. That will trigger, in this particular case, an email be sent based on those conditions. All right. All right, one more item to show you here. Dimension relationships. We can set up relationships between dimensions. One of the things that this can be helpful is to simplify the data entry by autofilling some related values between dimensions, okay? So in my example, I'm going to show you where I've set up a relationship between a customer and a department, and when I go in to enter an invoice, it's going to autofill that department, okay? We can also use it to filter dimensions, and so if we set this up and we have our relationship, and then we choose, in this particular case, again, I didn't set this up this way, but a customer, and if it had multiple departments, we could set this up so then when I went to that department field, then all I would see are the departments that are applicable to that particular customer, okay? And we can get that to cascade. So depending on what customer, then it's going to populate the related department. And then depending on what department we choose, it would then cascade and show the related locations for that department. Okay, so we can kind of get that to cascade through. So that's one of the things, that's some of the things you can do by setting up this dimension relationship. Okay. One more time into Sage Intacct, platform services. Now this one is not as intuitive because you'll notice on my menu there is no dimension relationships listed here. So we actually have to go to the object or table itself to create that. Okay, and so in this particular case, I created this on the customer. So if I start typing in customer, it will show me all of the objects that start with that. In this case, it's customer. Now I'm going to show you what I did for this one. In the edit here, the first thing I did was I came in here and I said I wanted it to autofill the related objects. So if you want that to autofill, you do have to turn that on. I also enabled this override. Okay, there's two schools of thought on that. Some people will say you don't want to enable the override because in effect, in that way, you kind of defeated the purpose of a relationship if you do that, right? Because if I enable an override, then it effectively said, all right, I'm going to create this relationship, but you can enter anything you want. This is actually pretty, can be used if really what you're trying to do is set up a default value, okay? So if, for example, 95% of the time when you enter a customer, it defaults to the same department, set up that relationship and enable the override. So for the times it doesn't, then that person can override that. Okay, and that's what I've done in this particular case. So I've already set that up. I'm going to go back to my customer. And then once I do that, I go up here at the top. There's going to be a relationship. And then this is where I'm going to choose what I want to relate that customer to. In this particular case, I said department. All right. And I've got one customer to one department. You can have many to many, one to many, or many to one. All right. When I set that up, what that will do is in my accounts receivable customer now, if I choose Sun Microsystems and scroll down to the bottom, I now have a department field where I can set up that relationship. So in this particular case, I'm saying that Sun Microsystems, I want it to default to 100 whenever I enter an invoice. Okay. So if I go into accounts receivable and go to add an invoice, and if I choose Sun Microsystems and scroll down to the bottom, you'll see that it brought in department 100. I do not have a relationship at this point for any other customers set up. So just so you can see, if I choose the next customer, then no department defaults in there. All right, so presumably I'd go through and probably set up a relationship with each customer and whatever department I wanted to default in. All right, that brings me to the end of my presentation. I do have real quickly one more poll question. If we can get that up, and once that's answered, then we can go on to the next topic. Very good. I was interested in what you thought might be the most helpful. I will tell you this, I am a little bit surprised. I thought, frankly, that the smart events might get a little bit higher than that. Custom fields doesn't surprise me at all. That's typically probably the most requested that we get to assist with that custom fields. That the smart events does surprise me a little bit. But thank you very much for answering that question, for attending this part of the presentation.
All right, we will move on to reporting with Nathan.
All right, Sherry said there, I'll be covering reporting. My name's Nathan. Just to get started here, specifically we're going to be talking about financial reports or custom financials in Intacct. So these allow flexibility in reporting fiscal data. You may be familiar with your GL, your set of dimensions. With these financials, we're able to take that GL and use it to our advantage to kind of slice and dice our data however we want. So we can look at, see there at the bottom right, we see our list of GLs on that statement of financial summary. So we have cash and equivalents. Maybe we want to break out our cash and equivalents by department, by location. We're able to do that just based on the way that Intacct is set up with these dimensions and with these custom financials. And we can use these to create these dashboards. So yeah, that dashboard you see there, any custom financial you create, you can then apply that to a dashboard for a manager, board member, even entry-level staff. They can all have individual dashboards with reports specific to their tasks. And then the custom formatting we're allowed and able to use allow users to track activity across all the report types, across all the different dimensions. And I will get into a demo here soon. First, I wanted to go with our first poll here, so we can get that up. And with this, kind of want to just get an idea of your satisfaction level with your current financials. All right, yeah, looks like we have quite a few people who are satisfied, if not very satisfied. Now there are some of those who are saying not fully satisfied or a little dissatisfied. Hopefully with this presentation, we can give you some of the tools of modifying your existing reports or even taking those to the next level. All right, with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into Intacct here and go through some items here with the reports. We'll pull Intacct up there. You can see my report center. If you're looking or following along, that'll be in your reports menu, report center. Here, I'm going to go ahead and use this little filter here. You can see there's reports from all across Intacct. We're going to be looking at financials today. I'm just going to go ahead and apply that filter. As it loads here, now we see only our financial reports. And we're going to be looking at this P&L. So as you can see here, if we wanted to run this, we would click here on the name. We're going to be working on editing this one. So we're going to try to take this and make it a little bit more customized, a little bit better for our use case. So anytime you edit the reports, it's a little different than some of your records in Intacct. A lot of them, if you write in your name or ID, when you first create that record, it's locked in. With reports, you can always go back and change those names. So if there's a circumstance where maybe you want to start using a numbering scheme, like you could see here, to filter or sort your reports, you can go back and add that later on. It's not a huge deal to do that, and it doesn't break anything. Another major tool on this first page with the report information is the duplicate function. So we're able to take any existing report and create a direct copy, all the same information, everything, by giving it a new name. We create that new report, and then we can go in and maybe change some of the formatting. So if we want to have reports specific to board members or reports specific to operations, we can do all that without having to change back and forth on those reports, and without having to start a new report from scratch. Another thing to mention on this page will be the report structure. You're almost always going to be looking at a report structure of accounts. Dimensions is a little bit more limited use case. We don't see that happening all that often. And I'll be focusing on accounts for this demo, just because getting into dimensions would probably take up a little bit too much time for us here. Right, and we're going to go here to our rows tab. Now this is kind of taking our GL and defining what items from that are going to be falling into this report. So you can see down here we have some account groups. And if we want to see which ones specifically, we'll select our account groups. And you can see out here we've got our own pre-built groups here, revenue, expense, net income. Now, it wouldn't really make sense here, but you can move these around. So if we wanted to say expenses, pretend that's something else, so it actually makes sense, is underneath net income, we can do that there. And then that's going to change what you see out here. So that would mean expenses would be down below net income. And then when we go to run our report, that would change in the report as well. Now, another thing we can do in this is select from a list of our already created account groups, or go in here and add a new account group. So really we can do just about everything we need in writing a report from this report writer. So we can come out here and we can create an account group. And I'll show you how to do that here in a minute through another route as well. So go ahead and close that. And just to discuss account group types, so right here we see two different types of account groups. Here's our revenue account group. If we click on this little arrow here in our view, we'll see that this is a group of accounts. And you can see it's a range here of our contributions through our 4,900 account. Close out of that, and we can see expenses here. If we look at this, we can see this is a group of account groups. And these account groups are then containing accounts themselves. So these are going to roll up. If we look at our report, how that's formatted, our revenue you can see is a single line item because those are all accounts rolling into one line. whereas our expenses are multiple lines rolling into expense, and then we get a total expense. So that's how those different types affect that. And you can see here as well, so we have single line items. If we were to change, say, revenue, we want to see on a detail level, and we preview that. That's going to change from a single line item to a line for every GL within that group, as long as it has data. I will say that. So by default, Intacct's going to hide anything that won't have data for the period you're running it. Now, you can't force that. So if I wanted to say every single account, I want to see that, I could hit this always display. It would show that. That gets a little bit messy. You're just seeing a lot of zeros oftentimes. So typically we leave that off. And as I mentioned before about adding an account group, I'm going to show you another way of doing that. So we're going to add here a new expense account group. So we're going to go into that expenses account. We're going to hit edit. And in the account group dropdown, we're going to hit add. Now we're going to be in a pop-up within a pop-up here, but we're going to create a payroll account group. And you can see display on report name and the total line auto-populate. Those can be changed at any time, those two displays. The name is going to lock in, similar to how any ID would there. Another thing to mention will be this balance here. This is going to be an expense account, so we're going to want our normal balance to be debit. It's an income statement item, so we want it to be for the period, so we pull up any data for the period, not any balances. Now down here with the accounts, we have a couple of options. So in this environment, our payroll accounts are the 5-1 accounts. So we could go in here and say 5-1-21, we want that. We want to add 5-1-22. We want to add 5-1-24. And we can add those individually. Now that does allow us to take them and move them around. So if we wanted to control how they show up in the report, maybe we don't want them to show up by their number in the GL. We want them to show up by some other sorting. We can do that. What would be considered, by me at least, the better option would be to come out here and say, I want to grab all accounts 5-1-21 through 5-1-28, and now I have a range. And what this does is it's going to eliminate any circumstance where we go in and we add a new GL in the future. Say we add 5-1-23, that's not currently in our GL. If we add that with the other way of doing this, where we added individual accounts, we would have to come into this account group and add that in the future. When we have a range like this, that lets us simply add that GL account. It's within this range. It's going to automatically pull into our report. So we don't have to worry about going in and changing our account groups. Now, I mean, it might be, maybe it's a 5-1-29. Then we do need to edit that end of the range. But for most circumstances, if you create a range, something falls within that range, you don't have to worry about adding that to your account groups in the future. All right, we're going to go ahead and save this. And we're going to hit add to our group. Now we want this one to show up at the top of our expenses. So we're going to drag that up there and hit save. Now you won't see that reflected here. It's not under the expenses. That's because this hasn't updated yet. So if we hit save here, that's going to refresh everything for us. And we can see now payroll is there. It came in with this details. We're going to change that to summary so it matches the other expense line items. And we're going to preview that report. Now we can see payrolls added out here. We can see our budget, how much is remaining, the percentage used. All that information is out here. And we're going to go ahead and hit save and make sure we don't lose any data. Oftentimes, if you are working in a report for a long time, you might have some sort of timeout issue with your internet. And you want to make sure you're saving as often as possible just to make sure you don't lose any work. All right, now with the expenses, you can see this little minus sign down here, net income, we have a plus sign. So what those are is if we click this plus sign net income, you can see that's an expand option. So this net income is really just taking these groups above here. If we look at that, we view it. All that is the revenue and expense groups that are already being referenced here, but it's taking them and netting those debits and credits together to come to our net income. If we wanted to say, maybe we need a really simple report, we want one line revenue, one line expense, one line net income. We can minimize this expense and we can set our revenues to a summary. Now we have a 3-line P&L. Most of you probably don't want that small amount of detail, but that is an option there. We'll go ahead and Hit save again. And we will look at the columns here now. So that will be what we're seeing out here. You can see there are these 4 lines of data, and there is this 5th column here. So what that first column that we're seeing there, that's our account name. So that column type, we have information on accounts, so we can show account names, account numbers, numbers and names. That's typically what we're going to start our report with. Our first column there on the left is going to be something that lets us know what account or what dimension we're looking at. Then our other items that are basically always used are going to be our actual data and our budget data. Those are kind of our bread and butter. There's very few reports you're going to be running without actual. Sometimes maybe you want just a budget report, but almost every report's going to have that. As you can see, that's this guy here. And one thing to keep in mind when you're making a report with multiple columns is, see here we want to compare an actual and a budget. We want to make sure the period that we're running those 2 columns for is the same. In Intacct, we're allowed the flexibility of saying maybe I want this one to be a year, I want this one to be our current month, I want the next one to be a current year, prior year. But with that flexibility, we need to keep in mind that if we're trying to reference 2 columns together, we want to make sure they're referencing the same period there. Then for our budget, we do have quite a few budget options. You can see budget here. That's our main one. That's what's going to allow us to choose the fiscal amounts that we've budgeted for. And on the second drop down here, this is where we would choose the specific budget we want. Oftentimes we suggest just keeping one budget. That prevents you from having to update your reports. With this environment, you can see we have an operating budget, we have forecasts. Maybe a lot of clients will see with board budgets, operating budgets, fund budgets, and those need to be separated, or even just fiscal years they want to keep separated. So that allows you to pick and choose which budget you're running a report for, but just keep in mind that if you change budgets or no longer using an old budget, you'll need to update that in your report as well. You can see the following 2 columns here are both referencing budget. So this is just a budget minus actual and a budget variance. So if we look at our report again, you can see there we are. It's our budget minus our actual, and that's our budget variance. Now to discuss a little bit on the filters tab here, this is another item that kind of helps us eliminate any bloat in our list of reports. So if we wanted to say, oh, I need a report, I need a P&L for my admin, we have that here as a department. So if we hit this drop down and we set this as an admin specific report and we save this, now anytime this is run from the report center, that's going to show up as admin unless we change that. What we like to do and like to see when possible is using this prompt function. And you can do that across any of your dimensions. So you can see there's quite a few dimensions enabled in this environment. So you might have less, but you can see that prompt function there. And what that allows is, say we want to just leave this open. And we want to say, I want to choose a department and location every time I run this report. We save this here. Now we're back here at our report center. Here's our report. We run it. Now we get to choose on this instance of running the report what we're running it for. So we could come out here and now we're running it for admin. Hit OK. We got our admin report. We can save that anywhere we need to. And we are running all that off of a single P&L. That saves us from having to say, I need to save and duplicate my P&L. I need to make it admin. I need another one for my sub-admin, another one for development, management, any of those items. We've eliminated all the necessity for duplicated reports, and we're just running it off of one report, filtering it however we need when it's being run. Now, kind of the purpose of what we're trying to get to here is we're taking this P&L and we want this to show up on a dashboard. So we've made a custom report, or we've changed our reports to match maybe what a specific manager wants to see. So if we go out to dashboards here and say this is a budget position analysis dashboard, that's for referencing the budget there. We'll come out here and we'll hit this plus symbol. And on this pop-up, we're going to choose our component type of report. We want our source to be financial report, and then our component is going to be that financials #1 P&L, the one we were working on there. We're going to hit save, and that's going to be added here. So you can see that's now on our dashboard. We can make edits to that directly. As long as we have permissions, we can change that setting that at the add screen there. If we want to just take that and reference a different report, we can. But that pulls it here. And then that report can then be filtered by different dashboard filters up at the top. Dates, all that information can be done through the dashboard as well. Something else I wanted to show here is going to be, we're looking at creating custom financials, working ourselves to add new things. One thing that comes with what we call the Interactive Custom Reports Writer, ICRW subscription, is an entire library of new reports. So if we come out here, we have Advanced Interactive Custom Reports and Report Library. You can see out here, for this environment, there are 98 reports. That's going to vary based off of what modules you have. So you can see we have AP reports, AR reports, cash management, GL, all these that come directly with the ICRW subscription, no setup involved in getting those there. They can be run as soon as you're subscribed and that's enabled. That's just going to vary based on your modules that you have enabled. So if you aren't using AR, you aren't going to see AR reports out here. And these are things like top 10 vendors, customers, different analysis items that could be useful to you in the future as well. Right, I'm going to jump back over to my slides here. And I think we want to take our second poll there. All right, I just want to get an idea how comfortable you are with updating reports. I know this is a very high level overview, so it might not provide too much. A didn't do that, but want to get an idea of how you're feeling after that. All right, yeah, it looks like the decent amount who are either comfortable or very. For that 45% who aren't, I mean, there are more tools in Intacct, more ways you can learn how to do that. You can also reach out to me, to anyone on our team for additional help as well.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. And that kind of wraps up the DWD topics here. I've got a few slides to show us before we get into our marketplace partners. All right, I'll run through these slides here real quick. Just wanted to give a reminder, if anybody wants to receive CPE credit for the user group here today, email Leah at her email address and just put in the subject line that it's for CPE credit. Another reminder here, save the date. We will be having our Intacct year-end webinar, Thursday, December 12th from 1 to 2 p.m. We'll cover how to process 1099s, whether you're printing and mailing those yourself, or if you want to e-file those through the software, mark your calendars for that. Depending on when you hop off the webinar or the user group here today, we ask that you take our survey. It's roughly 2 minutes of your time, and you do have an opportunity to win a $25 Amazon gift card. So we hope that you stay with us through the full time today, but if at any point you leave the user group, please take that survey. If you need help with any of the topics that we've covered on this portion of the user group, feel free to reach out to any of us here on the screen. We're happy to help. If there are any questions that we did not get to that you entered in the chat, we will be following up here in the next day or so. Did also want to remind everybody that you will receive a recording of this, and that should be later this week. So if you ever want to go back and review those areas that we covered already, you'll be able to do that with the recording. And so that brings me to the last slide here. We will be bringing on 3 marketplace partners to cover different options that integrate with Sage Intacct. That'll be starting here at 3 o'clock. Each of the marketplace partners there, DataBlend, VersaPay, and Martis, they are totally cloud-based. They have direct integrations with Sage Intacct and have deep vertical experience. These are all solutions that we here at DWD have personal experience with. Not only are they great software apps, their support and response have been great in working with each of them. If you have interest in any of these 3, please reach out directly to myself, Nathan, Cassie, Logan, Brad, Adam, and we're happy to help. So we'll give you a brief break here, about 5 minutes or so, and then we're going to start with DataBlend, and I will turn it over to their team. All right, everyone, we're right here at 3 p.m. Eastern time, so welcome back. We're going to start off with our first marketplace partner, DataBlend. I'll give a brief introduction and then I'm going to turn it over to Zachary. Their solution is great for fast, secure, worry-free integrations. They offer over 100 plus integrations with other applications, plus also custom integrations. It eliminates duplicate entry, needing custom development, and offers complete control over how integrations and syncs work. In our opinion, almost every Intacct customer could benefit from this, as there's almost always outside data feeding into Sage. It's a real workhorse that is a scalable solution and makes IT departments happy. If you have any interest after this presentation by Zachary, please reach out to myself or Adam. With that, I'd like to turn it over to you, Zachary. Please take it from here.
Perfect, thank you. So I'm going to take you through the presentation that we call Syncing Success, Seamless Integrations with Sage Intacct. More specifically, I'm going to talk about some different options that you have when it comes to integrating with Sage Intacct. I'm going to talk about some things to think about with the different options. I'm also going to talk about DataBlend itself, who we are, what we do, and then about half of the time, I'm going to show you how DataBlend actually works. I'm going to get in the tool and do a little bit of a demo. So quick intro, I'm Zachary Griggs, VP of Customer and Partner Experience here at DataBlend. I've been with the team for a little over 3 years. I manage our customer success as well as our professional services team. So I get the unique experience of working with the entire DataBlend's lifecycle across our customers and partners. I work in the tool quite often, so I do many of these integrations myself, as well as my team, obviously, in supporting them. Specific to the context of this call, I've worked in Sage Intacct for over 10 years now. I'm a past accountant, director of finance, led a CPM practice, and we've used Sage Intacct at DataBlend since the beginning of this year. So I continue to be an end user when it comes to Sage Intacct, and we actually use DataBlend internally to integrate many systems with the Sage Intacct software. So who's DataBlend? So I have 6 tiles here. I'm just going to run through quick. We're an iPaaS solution. So for those not familiar, iPaaS is Integration Platform as a Service, which is a fancy way of us saying that we work with integrations. We're an integration platform that moves data between many different software. Sage Intacct being a core part of our offering, but we do really any software that's in the Office of Accounting and Finance. That is our specialty, though we do work outside of that. The vast majority of our connections and integrations will apply to the Office of Accounting and Finance. Hopefully you see it when we get into the product, but a big focus of ours is making the tool intuitive, easy to use. We're firm believers that an integration tool is only as good as it is easy to use. And so we try to get users like all of you, which are Intacct users, individuals that might be in accounting or in finance and FP&A, being able to use what generally is a pretty complex concept within integrations. Now, as an extension of that, we follow the no-code, low-code type of approach that you probably hear pretty often when it comes to integration. But hopefully I show you exactly in our tool later on this call how we're doing that. But you don't have to understand API calls or scripting or coding to still be able to build and use all of these robust integrations. As a note, we can connect to many different software, connect and pull different data sets, join it together. You can go from A to B to C to D and so on. It really doesn't just have to be Intacct. You can do much more than that as well. We have 800 plus customers and connect to over 100 different systems that are out there. We also have the ability to build custom connections. And so if it's not one of those 100 that we've worked with before, we can connect to it as long as it has an API and we can gain access to it. So tons of options, tons of flexibility and power in the platform, but hopefully we've successfully gotten to a point where our user interface is one that really enables an Intacct user to leverage all of this integration capability. And then lastly, we focus on the SMB space, but we also have some lower enterprise as well as some enterprise customers as well within that 800. And so the key takeaway there, though, is if whatever your business looks like today and what you're integrating, DataBlend can scale with you. If you go from a single entity in Intacct to a multi-entity, you break into multi-currency, you change your configuration, you work in Salesforce and you add new objects, new instances, not a problem. DataBlend as a platform can scale with you, your integrations can scale with you, so as you grow, so do the tools around you and how your integrations are working. All right. So just speaking from experience, when I was in accounting, I always found the different options around integrations a little bit intimidating, also expensive, depending on what the options were. So I just want to run through a few that are out there and kind of my opinion as far as the pros and cons and things to think about when it comes to those. So obviously you have imports, exports, right? You don't think of it as an integration, but it is some type of automation, the movement of data. We all do it, right? If you've worked with Intacct, you're probably doing some imports or having someone on your team do some imports. And so, obviously it's reliable, right? You just have a person that goes and does it. It does some Excel gymnastics and can move data between the system, but it's not real time. It's error prone. Nobody really loves doing it. Nobody wants to spend their time in Excel moving things around. So it's more of a default. That's kind of a plan B, but not the ideal state. Then you get into like out of the box connections or point to point. If you've worked with like Bill.com is a great example. They have a marketplace listing. You can connect. It does really well to connect Intacct into Bill.com. And if it fits your needs, it's perfect, right? Now, those tend to be cost effective too, just a part of your subscription with a tool like Bill. But it has to fit what your process is, right? You have to have the right configuration of Intacct. You have to have the same fields get populated and filled between them. So it's a bit rigid, but if it works for you, that's great. It's just, how do you find if you have 6 different software that integrate with Intacct, they all have to have out-of-the-box connections, and they all have to fit your process. And so what happens too often when it comes to these out-of-the-box connections is if you really like a software, you tend to change your ideal process to align with the integration of that software rather than the integration supporting your ideal process. And so it becomes a bit backwards where you're not able to build out your process in the ideal state. Next, if you start to get into some databases with some on-prem or some legacy, maybe proprietary databases, it's very technical. IT's involved. It's generally hard to push data into a structured database as well. And so if you start to work with those types of connections, it becomes more of an IT function than something that you'd want to do in the Office of Accounting. And then probably the most popular over the years has been custom integrations. You hire a third party, they come in, they create a spec, usually like 20 pages long. They give you a bill that says we're going to charge you $50,000, $100,000 to build out these integrations. So it's quite expensive, and it needs to go through some robust design sessions where you're basically translating, let's say, your quote to cash process into what that means for a developer to go write the code and build this out, host the code, and then if things change, Intacct changes, like they add to their API, they enhance it, HubSpot's changed how you authenticate with it. When that happens, you're reliant on this third party and also reliant on paying their costs to support it. And so though it is tailored to your needs, it's going to be a heavy investment of time and resources along the way. And you're really tied to that third party where you can't maintain it in-house in most cases. And then lastly is implementing an iPaaS solution. So I'm not biased at all, but I'm a big fan of iPaaS solutions because it gives you a platform which allows you to maintain all of those different, like let's say 6 or 7 different software on your tech stack in one place. So you're learning one tool. You're not learning 6 or 7 different point-to-point connections. You're learning one tool, one place that's going to allow you to understand, run your integrations, maintain your integrations. You own it. You have access to it. Someone else, some third party is not owning it for you and maintaining it. You're the one that's able to leverage it because that platform, ideally, is user-friendly. The biggest thing that you want to be mindful of with the iPaaS tool is the learning curve, because if it's hard to use and learn, you might as well go with the custom, right? Because it's just extra steps if you're going to go with the platform, but it's not something that you can maintain yourself. And so that is one thing you definitely want to be able to get a good feel for, that the solution you're looking at is also user-friendly in addition to powerful. So early in 2024, this year, DataBlend and Sage Intacct partnered, and DataBlend became an ISV partner of Sage, where there's what's called a data flow, which is essentially a subscription on your Intacct order that allows you to add DataBlend as a part of your Intacct subscription. And you gain access to the DataBlend platform as a whole. And you can connect many different systems using those different data flows. And a goal between Sage and DataBlend in doing this was that we understand that Sage Intacct, I think it was mentioned earlier, everyone that uses Sage Intacct has some data they need to get in and out of the system. And so we wanted to give away to the Intacct user that gives you a cost-effective and easy-to-use method of integrating all the different external sources and pulling data in and pushing it out of Intacct. So this is just to give you a visual of a type of use case when it comes to data flows and how Intacct you can see is at the hub. But then as I go through, you can start to visualize, now you have potentially a payroll system, let's say Paycom. And Paycom is sending in journal entries into Intacct, maybe doing some stat entries for headcount as well. But you also need to send that payroll information into your CPM, maybe use Adaptive, Workday Adaptive, and you want to send it in for your forecasting. And so if you have a data flow with Paycom and Intacct, but also Adaptive and Intacct, you have the capability to not only send the data in and out of Intacct, but you can also send it from Paycom into Adaptive as well. And so this is the concept of this any-to-any that we like to say at DataBlend, where you don't have to exclusively focus on the Sage Intacct. It is your core, right? It is what we'd be, at the center of your tech stack is going to be Intacct. But if you have other use cases, you can also have these data flows pass the data because of the concept of a platform to have all these different integrations support it. And then continuing along, maybe you have HubSpot or Salesforce. You have some quotes you want to send in as order entry transactions, some payment information you want to send back to HubSpot or Salesforce. Just another example where you can connect the two, but then you can also send your sales forecast data into Adaptive as well. And then lastly, you might send your actuals from Intacct into Adaptive. So all of these different connections boil down to 4 different systems. You got HubSpot, Sage, I used Adaptive as the example in Paycom for payroll. And so you have 4 different software that you're connecting and 6 different integrations, all of those being in one place. You can use the data flow to accomplish that. So you don't have to worry about finding out, does HubSpot have a native integration with Adaptive? Do I have to pay to have a custom one built? How about Paycom and Sage, but then Paycom and HubSpot if I wanted some commission data to flow between the two? This gives you that concept of everything on a single platform, and you can have this any-to-any between all the different systems that you're connecting. So I'm not going to read all of these, but this is a little bit about what goes into building an integration, and I'd like to use this to highlight the methodology when it comes to DataBlend, because we're doing everything that a custom integration is, just at 1/10 the price tag associated with it to get it set up, because all of these things, the highly technical things, expiring tokens, authenticating, reading API documentation, writing code, hosting code, troubleshooting, all those things are happening with DataBlend as well, but it's happening behind the scenes because our focus is to allow the Intacct user to focus on the basics. We want you to just focus on your use case, and we're going to do all the other stuff, right? We made the strategic assumption that if we have 100 clients that connect to HubSpot, they're all going to connect to HubSpot in the same way. So why build it bespoke every time and charge a client for that? Instead, we build it into our product. And in about 5 minutes, I'll show you what that looks like. And you'll see that you can, at a click of a button, go through, and you don't have to do any of the behind-the-scenes stuff. We already did it. We built it into our product. And that's going to allow you to focus on that basics column, where you're essentially just establishing a connection, figuring out what data you want to pull, transform it a little bit, and send it into the target, Intacct. So it's going to allow you to spend more of your time on that piece in a very simplified model, keeping in mind the no code, low code. And so you don't have to go in there and build out any of the more technical API calls and authentication, because we've already done that. And so the goal for DataBlend is that you can focus on those basics, build your ideal process, dictate what the ideal process is, because the tool is customized to your needs, right? You're not doing it out of the box. You don't have to have it do exactly, these specific fields to this specific destination. We're going to be able to accommodate what your ideal process is, and then also automate the whole thing, right? So don't just do invoices from Salesforce into Intacct. Maybe you have products, SKUs that you want to do as items. You have sales reps that you want to do as an employee dimension. You want to send whatever payment information back to Salesforce. Automate that entire process along the way, because the platform doesn't just limit you to say, I want to move invoices to order entry or opportunities into order entry. You have the flexibility to do all of those things on that platform. Right? So hopefully, in the last 14 minutes, the things to take away from this is that integrations don't have to be difficult or expensive. Data flows through Sage is what we are putting out there to help make them easy, take this historically expensive and difficult concept, simplifying it and giving you access to it. Then the power of any-to-any. Don't just focus on Intacct, figure out what are all the other systems. What else do I want to do with my payroll data? What else, what other reporting can I get out of my FP&A tool because I have access to Paycom data, because I have CRM data, sales data, forecast data, and so on. And automate the whole thing. Automate each facet of that movement of data. It doesn't have to just be, A, B, or C. You could also just add in there, commission data and going into your Paycom system or from HubSpot into Intacct. So you can really get creative in expanding that use case beyond just moving invoices from Salesforce. All right, so I'm going to jump into the product now so you can get a feel for the UI and kind of what goes into building out one of those integrations. So on the screen here, I'm logged in. It's cloud-based, and if you're familiar with Intacct, think of like Data Blend Demos, e.g. That is my Intacct company. It's my Data Blend company. I've logged in, and I'm on what's called the dashboard. And our dashboard, in this case, this is built out, right? This is a day in the life of somebody using our integration tool to do many things. In my favorites box, you can see I have about 12 different use cases. There's a lot of ADP in here, Adaptive, Sage Intacct, Salesforce, some RevRec. I have some vendor information coming from Salesforce, many different things. So if you think of that visual of all the any to any, that's what's showing up here. You can manage all of these in one place. And if I wanted to kick off one of those integrations, I can. I just simply hit run. So you'd have access to this. This is what you'd have access to by having data flows. And this is just an example of where you can have many different things in one place. Once I ran that, you can see it's running through in the history section on the right. You have an audit trail that's going to give you visibility into who ran this, what data was run in between the two. Was it successful? Was there any issues with your data? When was the last time it ran? You can click into the steps. It's going to give you visibility. You can literally download the data that came from, in this case, Salesforce as well. So you have full visibility and access to everything along the way within the integration. And this is for every single one of those integrations. If you're like me, you don't want to have to click that run button, so you can schedule everything. So you can say, I want my actuals to go to Adaptive, and I want that to be every day, so my financials are up to date, but I want my invoices to feed over from HubSpot or Salesforce every hour. So you can have different schedules based on the different systems, and you can control that. You dictate what you want the schedule to be. Everything you're looking at, you'd have access to within Data Blend. And then lastly, you have your credentials. And so this is just, do you have an active connection to the given system? So for example, my Blackline credentials expired, but my Adaptive credentials active. So this is a example of something that's built out. But what goes into this? What is somebody doing within this tool to get to this point? So if I hop over here, I go into this other company. This one's called Transform Your Business. It's just a different company, completely separate. And you can see it's an empty shell. There's nothing in here at all. So what goes into actually building an integration that's functional? So the only thing I've done preemptively is I added my Intacct credential. I didn't want you to have to wait for me to do a web service user and add it in the credentials, so I did that ahead of time. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build a successful connection between HubSpot and Intacct to represent the quote to cash process, or at least the start of it, and then I'll run it so you can see that it's going to pass through data, and it's going to take us, if I do everything right, about 5 minutes. So within here, the first thing we want to do, if you think of the basics, was establish the connection. So I'm going to go in and add a credential. When I do that, you can see I have a drop-down, and there's many different software in here. Probably a lot of names that are familiar to you. The one I care about is HubSpot. So once I go on HubSpot, I'm going to give it a name, and I'm going to choose that it's a Data Blend credential. Once I hit save, it gives me access to this button here, and I'm going to click on that. I'm going to connect to my dev environment, my sandbox. We use Data Blend internally as well. HubSpot internally. What I just did was I approved the app to access my HubSpot. It then grabbed the access token and the refresh token. Now, if you're more technical, what happened behind the scenes is it processed an API call. It authenticated using OAuth 2.0 between the two systems. It connected it and then got an access token and refresh token, and it's going to make sure that those don't expire so that your connection stays active in perpetuity. All of those things, if someone built it custom behind the curtain, that middle column on that slide, all of those things would take quite a bit of time to do. For us, because we built this standard user interface, it'll take someone to go in and click those buttons about 30 seconds to accomplish. And that's the concept that we've used throughout the tool, is what could we do to standardize this so we take the hard stuff, the technical piece, put it behind the scenes, and still give you access to establish that connection with just a couple clicks. So now I have my two credentials, right? We have Intacct and we have HubSpot. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Automate. I'm going to use our setup wizard. In here, I'm going to choose my source data as HubSpot, my target is Intacct, and here's a bunch of different options. So keeping in mind this is all quote to cash, I'm going to focus on customers to start. When I do that, you'll notice I have 5 different steps along the way. And so I can hit next. And I already did my credential. This is why I did it first, so I can select it. When I do, you're going to see that this populates with about 177 fields. If you've worked with HubSpot, it's very customizable. You can add properties very quickly. This is taking all of those from my HubSpot, giving me a list so that I can choose which ones I want to send to Intacct on my customer record. The right side are the ones that are defaulted that we already chose. But let's say I wanted to add another one. I want to grab description. I just simply go in here and select it. And then I go to my next step. Now I map my data. I'm going to take my data from my source, which is HubSpot, to my target, which is Intacct. And I can come in here, and here's my description field, right? And it doesn't know where to go within Intacct. So I click on this, and I can choose, and this probably looks familiar because these are the Intacct fields. I can come in here and say I want it to go into my comments field, for instance. I can also drag and drop. So you can see here I can switch around my address if I wanted to. But then once I've done my mapping, I can go to next. The thing to take away here is that we're not saying you have to use these fields. These are just the defaults. You can grab new fields from HubSpot if you wanted to. You can send to custom fields within Intacct, user-defined dimensions, standard fields, whatever you'd like. On the Intacct side, you have full flexibility. Then we go to next. We choose our Intacct credential. And then we go to the final step. And it's going to do a bunch of stuff, right? It's doing about 10 different things. So that's all the stuff that's happening behind the curtain. And all I had to do was select, through those 4 steps of questions that are hopefully very intuitive to go through. Now it built a successful connection. I'm going to favorite this. I'm going to go back to my dashboard. Now you're starting to see that my grid here, my quadrant, is filling up. So with this connection, what I'm going to do is kick this off. And then in Intacct, you'll see I don't have a brand new company, right? And then I have in HubSpot, I do have brand new company, just using that as an example. Now, this integration is going to go pick up that new company, and it's going to go add it within Intacct. And so the whole start to finish with a successful connection took us under 5 minutes to build, just to go through the wizard. The question we always get is, what happens if we're unique? What happens if our Intacct configuration is unique? We used a different object in HubSpot, and we're not using company, something like that. Now, the wizard can get you 95% of the way there. And then all of this is, none of it's hidden behind where you can't access it. Somebody can go in that's certified in Data Blend, or yourself if you're comfortable with it, and you can modify this. You can go into our query and you can say, I actually want it to go to this other field, or I want it to come from this other object along the way. So you're not limited by using the wizards. It's just meant to make things a little bit easier for you. And you can see that finished up, took just under a minute. Come in here, and there's my brand new company. And so it passed through between the two, so you can see that it's a successful connection. The last step in the process would be if I came in here and I give it a schedule. I want this to run every day, so I go to my presets. I'm going to do every day, Monday through Friday. Simply click through that. And I want it to be 6, let's do a.m. Hit OK. Run it as me. Let's go back to my dashboard, and there we go. Now we have a schedule. So we have a successful connection, one we can use. We've scheduled it for the future. You see the history of it running, and now I can go into my Automate, my wizards, and I can choose the next one. And I would go through and say, okay, now I want to do items. Now I want to do order entry transactions. And it's a lot of rinse and repeat at this stage. You'd be able to come in. I'm not going to go through this at the same level of detail here, but I do want to showcase within this one, you can see it's doing some transformations to the actual data. By default, I can choose to send things in as posted, as draft, different locations, and so on. So the different types of integrations are going to have different options as well as you go through the wizards. But as you can see here, that wizard, the whole process to set it up, especially using HubSpot and Intacct being one example, and there's a number of other wizards as well, can make this whole process be measured in hours, that you have something built out and tested and live, ready to go between these two systems. And then this platform, this is just the start, where I have one connection. You can continue to add to it to get to something that looks more like this, where you have a lot of different connections, a lot of different integrations between them. But as far as the product goes, I did want to just give you that high level of a day in the life of an integration, as well as get some exposure to the actual setup that happens behind the scenes. So now I know we have about 5 minutes left. I did want to just check if there were any questions, really about anything that I've shown or not spoke to yet.
We do have a couple questions here. So one for you, does Sage Intacct have a relationship with Paycor? We use Paycor for our payroll processing, and I would like to be able to upload payroll directly from Paycor to Sage Intacct if possible. This would save me a considerable amount of time. Now, if my knowledge serves me right, Paycor does not have a direct integration, so would this be a good example of that?
Yep, and you can see on the screen here, I navigated back, you can see in the credentials, we have a Paycor connection. So you can use Paycor, you could use data flows and data blend to connect to Paycor.
One other question here, as you're kind of going through the HubSpot and any other integrations, errors, is it easy for a traditional user to troubleshoot errors, or would that be handled by more of a technical team?
So Data Blend has a support team as well as our partners as well, and so you can always reach out to us to assist you if anything comes up. But just to give you some visibility into the troubleshooting, I'm going to go into this group because I know I've forced an error before. If I come in, you can see in the state, I can go to my errors, and then if I come in and let's say I hover over this one, if you've worked with Intacct, you're probably familiar with something that looks like this. So see how it says invalid account test XYZ? It's going to give you whatever the response is, similar to if you did an import of Intacct and you tried to import something that wasn't, the right value. It's going to tell you what that is, and then this would allow me to say, okay, I need to go look at my data, see where account test XYZ was used, and I need to replace it with an actual GL account or add the GL account to Intacct and then rerun it. So it will vary system to system. Intacct's really good though. Intacct gives some very insightful errors, and then you'd be able to come in here, and this is just if you want to look within Data Blend, but you don't have to do it within Data Blend. We do allow notifications as well, so you can have it go right to your inbox. So if you have it on a schedule, you don't have to check if it worked or not. You're going to get notified when it doesn't. You can also do what we call this data quality report here, and that'll allow you to validate some of the data, do some checks along the way, and this is more of a custom build out for the data quality, but so you ultimately you have a lot of different options, but it does, hopefully, the vast majority of our clients can troubleshoot and resolve a lot of the day-to-day issues that come up.
Wonderful. And then maybe one more here for this afternoon. We have a lot of nonprofits on here, and so donations are a big deal. This question kind of relates to that. It's somewhat broad, but like, what if you have different sources? Let's say it's donations coming in through Stripe, maybe you have them coming through Venmo and different other sources. Is that like a separate workflow, or how does that work?
Mm-hmm. So personally, I've worked with nonprofits for the last 10 years, so very much in my experience, and this comes up quite often. When it comes to different connections, so using like Stripe as an example, you can see that's one that we have in there. You would have the different connections to the different systems, and then you'd be able to set up a workflow for each. So you'd have your Stripe example, you have giving data, whatever, whichever your different donor management systems may be, or your payment processors that you wanted to use for that, you would then have the connection and the workflow associated with each one of those, and then that would flow into Data Blend, and you have the option, right? You can have all of that go into different order entry transactions in Intacct, different journal entries, you can have it go into AR, whatever makes sense for your use case, but you ultimately set those up as distinct workflows from the different systems.
Okay, so we got one more here that popped up after that. If you've got time for one more here.
Yep.
If our source of truth is Salesforce, can we connect Stripe to Salesforce and then from Salesforce to Intacct?
Definitely. Very common use case for us. Pass it through that system and then come in. So that's a perfect example of like going from A to B to C rather than just directly from Stripe to Intacct. And that's that any-to-any concept. You don't have to have it go directly to and from Intacct. You can have it bounce off of like that use case, off of Salesforce first. So Stripe goes to Salesforce before Intacct. Not a problem.
Very good. If anyone has any additional questions, feel free to reach out. And if anybody has interest in Data Blend, reach out to Adam or myself. Zachary, wonderful presentation. Appreciate your time here today.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to our next marketplace partner here. For those of you not familiar with VersaPay, I'll give a brief introduction before turning it over to Derek and Christine. VersaPay is a great fit for customers that are looking to streamline their AR process, accept credit cards and electronic payments, and even offer a customer portal. It's got a direct integration with Sage and is quite intuitive. I personally like that the invoice layouts designed in Intacct are available in the customer portal. Derek and Christine, presentation is all yours.
Okay, thank you. All right, good afternoon, everybody. This is Derek and Christine on the call from VersaPay. Today we're going to talk to you about AR automation. Give me a second here, I need to advance. All right, there we go. So that's who we are. So I'm the channel partner manager. I work with DWD, and Christine DeLorenzo is our senior sales engineer. And since Christine is going to be showing you the product, she's going to be walking you through the product. So before we get to the product, I'll just talk a bit about what we're going to do today. So we're going to talk a bit about how that AR disconnect within your organization, how it's affecting your organization, some of the things you can do to fix that disconnect. And we get into the product demo, and then we'll talk about a real life example of one of our customers and how they've actually done really well with VersaPay. And hopefully at the end we can have some time. I think we will, and we'll open up for some questions. All right, so VersaPay. VersaPay is an endorsed solution with hundreds of customers with Sage. So we've been around for a long time. We've been around for over 15 years. We've partnered with Sage for over 15 years. Since 2009, we've been on the Sage Partner Marketplace. So you can find us in the marketplace. And what we've originally been known for is really a payment solution, but we've now added on AR collaboration, which allows you to interact with your customers interact with those customers over the web and get those payments in a lot faster. So let's talk about why someone like yourselves would do this, why companies need to have an AR automation solution. And some of you might already know this and already say, oh yeah, I get it, I know I need something better. But let's talk about what we need. So where I typically look at is like, where are some of the insufficiencies in the AR journey? And those are things like, lost or not received invoices. So sometimes that happens. Sometimes you have disputes with invoices, and if any of you are AR, you probably see those, have those interactions and conversations with your customers. Not getting payments in time, overdue payments, short payments. What do you do with credit notes? How do you apply certain things? And just simply getting payments in on time and getting those reconciled in the system can all be things that take a lot of time, that take up a lot of your resources, and sometimes it provides bad customer experience. So those are the things that VersaPay is here to fix. Those are the things we're here to fix for you guys. So your AR team and the customer and your customers obviously deserve better, right? So we want to make sure that you have a solution out there that can help you with this. Some of the facts that we have here are a typical AR process will hurt your AR team, your customers, and your cash flow. So any of you are looking at your cash flow and thinking how we can improve those cash flows, you probably want to look at the AR process and what you're doing today and how we can clean that up and make that more efficient. What we've done when we started on this journey, we went out and we interviewed or we've surveyed about 300 CFOs. We used and we worked with Wakefield to help us do the survey, and we went up there and surveyed some of these people, and we figured out what are some of the things that they need to improve on. And we found that there was a lot in the AR space that needs improvement. So CFOs, 39% of those CFOs reported that their customer or their accounts receivable team are weeks or maybe even months behind, or probably will never catch up on invoicing and getting things all catch up. And that's how 39% of them feel. So that's a pretty strong number of CFOs. Now, 77% of those CFOs feel that accounts receivable teams are not quite up to date. So it's taking them longer than they need to. They're just always playing catch up and they're always trying to get back on top of things. But that's what 77% of CFOs feel. 27% of CFOs feel that invoices on average are delayed due to lapse in communication. So think about when you send out an invoice to your customer and they say they don't receive it. By the time you figure it out, you may probably made a phone call to do collection, and then now you got to resend that invoices. So they feel that there's some lack of communication with the customers, and that needs to be done. Something needs to be done about it. Now, 80% of those CFOs report that multiple times a month, or even more, challenges with invoices arise that are outside the ability of their current payments process system. So if you think about some of this, you always get the one-offs that you can't fix, but there's a lot of those one-offs that seem to come up that you actually have to take a lot of manual time, manual process and effort to fix it up and resolve those AR situations. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, that means that, if you're dealing with some of that, you're probably dealing with lost, money lost, and you're dealing with time wasted. You're dealing with probably some angry or upset customers that you need to get that fixed. And, by getting all those fixed, it really helps your business, helps you grow your business. All right, so let's take a look at having that disconnect between your AR team and your customer's AP team. What does that look like? So we all know what that looks like. There's invoices that are lost or received by a wrong person, so maybe they don't even see the invoice. Discrepancies are hard to resolve. Insufficient backup documents. So sometimes your customers want to know, have some backup documents on why they're getting these invoices, and you may not have those, readily built or made it easy to send. Those are some of the things that we're looking at. Invoices stuck in someone's desk, checks in the mail, and how many times have you heard that? Checks in the mail, and missing or incomplete remittance data. So all of that leads to a lot more manual work, a lot more delay in terms of you increasing your cash flow. So we also did another survey of executives, and we wanted to figure out what are some of the things we can do. So we looked at about 1,000 different C-level executives at companies that are $100 million or more in annual revenue. Now, what they said to us is that 92% of those agreed that every department needs to be digitized. So we all know that we're moving into the future and we need to digitize as much as we can and make it more efficient. But 60% of those executives say AR digitization has been a low priority over the years, and they do need to make that a priority moving forward. 96% say that there are improvements needed in digitizing AR. So that's 96% of executives say they really think they should be doing something in the AR, in their AR department to improve things. 93% of those executives say the right technology can strengthen customer relationships, and building and growing those customers and having satisfied customers definitely shows how strong that company is. So 89% of those executives say that their customer experience is a key measure of their effectiveness as leaders of the company. So they do believe that if their customers being happy, their customers being satisfied, shows really well on them and shows that they are doing really well for the company. All right, so what are other organizations doing? Well, organizations are doing a lot of different things to try to mitigate and try to improve their where AR is at right now. And some of the things that they are doing doesn't really all address every part of the story here. So it doesn't really address the AR disconnect, but we really need to resolve that. So companies are, there's about 43% of companies that are doing things like e-invoicing or sending out e-invoicing. Another 43% are tracking or doing better reporting. 40% of companies out there are automating their payment matching, and 45% of the companies out there are automating electronic payments. So this is from a survey we did, and we've learned that there are companies out there that are trying to improve their AR, trying to improve the department, but they're doing one or a couple or even all of these, but they're not getting to where they need. But one of these, but none of these solutions, like I said, will actually bridge that AR disconnect. And that's what we really want to do, that communication between your customers to get things resolved really quickly. So what we've done, we've come up with a solution that really does increase efficiency, reduce the manual labor, accelerate cash flow, and, at the end of the day, give you fewer manual errors in the system. Right, and we want to make that more human. And by doing that, we created VersaPay and created a solution that can do that for you. So VersaPay, what does it bring to the table? We partnered up with Sage, and VersaPay allows you to have this whole efficiency suite. In that efficiency suite, we have things like the collaborative AR. The collaborative AR is a tool that allows you to connect with your customers through a customer portal, allows customers to review their invoices, pay their invoices through that portal, have all the history of all their payments and all their stuff, and it allows you to actually communicate with those customers through that portal. So if they had a dispute with, with their invoice, they can actually, add their complaints into that portal. You get a record of that, you can reply to it, and help resolve that a lot faster. Cash applications, another solution that uses AI technology, and what that does is takes those checks that you're receiving, takes those payments that you're getting, wire transfer checks, so on, and it takes all of that and allows you to apply those automatically, giving you really high accuracy rates compared to doing it manually. Even when it comes to handwritten checks, you can actually take those checks and apply them using AI technology. We also have our VersaPay payment solution, which allows you to take payments from multiple channels. So if you're doing e-commerce, if you're having a POS system, if you have just, in your AR system or your order entry system, allows you to take those payments and apply those payments quickly, whether it's ACH or credit cards. And of course, there's a large payment network that allows you to communicate with your customers easily over the cloud. Okay, at this point here, I'm going to pass it over to Christine, and Christine's going to go through the demo of just what I spoke about, and then after that, I'll come back and I'll talk about one of our customers and how that experience went.
Okay, can everyone see my instance here of Sage Intacct?
Yes.
No, not I. Oh, yes. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you, Derek. And, in terms of this is VersaPay, this is the first tier of VersaPay's AR efficiency suite. So where we have embedded directly within Sage Intacct. So there's a few different areas that you'll see our VersaPay solution. The first is you're going to notice that we have a VersaPay payments application. So this is where all settlement information is easily seen as payments are getting made throughout the day. It also will create the cash receipts journal that helps from an AR or from the reconciliation perspective, making it super easy for accountants to reconcile all those payments that have come through. We've also embedded directly within the accounts receivable area within the customer's records. So if you were to open up a customer record, down below again is where you would see VersaPay's embedded solution. And from a contact management perspective, this is really where it makes it super easy for a Sage Intacct user to come in, enabling surcharging, making a customer exempt or non-exempt, where stored payment methods can be viewed here and used across the platform, or you could sign up a customer for auto pay program. That's super easy to come in here and do as long as they have a payment method on file. And then also managing all the contacts. So not only will we manage the contact that's on the customer record, but we also have additional contacts that can be added to receive notifications as well. From an invoicing perspective, as soon as the invoice is created, that's what's going to generate a notification that goes out to a customer. So here, if I open up an invoice, again, notice all of this is the native Sage Intacct functionality. Down below is where VersaPay's ribbon comes in. So really geared towards allowing for a Sage Intacct user to be able to take a payment over the phone if that is something that works for that particular client. So clicking on process payment pulls up the virtual terminal, keeps everything here directly in Sage Intacct. If there is that stored card on file, it will default to use that. However, if you're capturing a new payment at the time, you can simply toggle over to new card and enter in those new card details. VersaPay can accept processing payments with credit cards or ACH. As I mentioned with that surcharging, that is something that is also supported as well. So if customers make payments through the portal using a credit card, we can assist with that. Once that invoice has been paid, it'll mark that status to paid, and notifications will get sent to customers. For Sage Intacct users that are also using sales orders, we can also take deposits and pre-authorizations on sales orders. Again, down below is where that VersaPay ribbon will be embedded, so the ability to authorize a payment, request a deposit, either an exact amount or even a percentage. All of those notifications will go out to the customer, letting them know how much is due at the time. So that's how a Sage Intacct user could utilize and take advantage of the VersaPay solution. What does it look like for the customers, right? So this is an example of an email that a customer would get when an invoice is created. As soon as that invoice is posted, this is the notification that goes out. The customer can access a copy of the invoice that's generated directly from Sage Intacct here. or they can simply click on the Pay Now page and it'll take them to this payment page where they'll be able to see those details. Also, again, giving them another access point to be able to quickly pull up that invoice copy here. And then those two payment options, so paying with either a credit card or toggling over here and entering those ACH details. Taking it a step further, we also offer a customer portal. So the customer portal is another way for a customer to come in and make payments. Here, they just have a lot more visibility and flexibility with using this portal. So on the invoice tab, if they happen to know their invoice or other reference information that we can also configure and pull over from Sage, or they can use these pre-filtered buttons here. All this data is exportable too, so the customer can really get access into all of their data that they need. Credits can also be visible for a customer. Multiple invoices can be selected and paid at one time. If they were to click into an invoice, this is again where we'll present that copy of the invoice that comes directly over from Sage. And for customers that really need something other than an invoice, so like a bill of lading or other type of supporting document that might be required, we can also pass that information over here as well. So no need for sending out an invoice and then trying to follow up with another document to make sure that a customer has everything they need to make a payment. Really where we get our name and our unique offering here with this collaborative AR solution is the ability for customers to communicate with you directly here in the portal, open up different disputes with different reason codes and drop downs. So once they create that communication, the activity log will be tracked. So having that audit detail there. And then the supplier will also be notified that a communication has been sent from a particular customer. They want to move forward with making a payment. Here they have a lot more flexibility than that Pay Now page. They can use those saved payment methods that are on file, the credit cards here. There's different payment rules that can also be put into place, making it easier to kind of steer with customers to specific payment methods. And really, to like what Derek was saying with bridging the gap, really making it easier for AP teams to come in here and make payments as well. So do they want to make a payment now while they're on the portal, or do they want to schedule this out with something that resonates more with their internal controls, or maybe they can only make a payment on a Friday or something like that. For customers that also need to be in an auto pay program, or if they're using the contracts module and there's that recurring billing, coming in and setting up an auto pay for a customer from the customer point of view is also very easy for them to do. Here they have more flexibility with the collaborative AR portal. They can do it on the due date, on receipt of that invoice, or on a specific month. Even specific invoice types can also be set up on an auto pay program, and you can have multiple auto pay programs. So you could have one where maybe my recurring invoices are set up into one program, and then maybe another one where my maximum invoice is $10,000. Anything above that needs 2 signatures, so maybe I need to send a payment in a different fashion. So that's just how the customer could come in and view all of those invoices, make payments here. All of the payment activity will also flow here as well. And this data syncs back and forth between Sage Intacct near real time. So they're getting the most up-to-date information. Offline payments like checks and things like that are also going to be visible here in the portal from the customer perspective. Now looking at it from the lens of the supplier, so taking the extension of what you're seeing in Sage Intacct, you're seeing all of your customers here on a dashboard. Those customers that have the most outstanding balance are all going to be noted here as well. Can easily configure the dashboard to pull different entities and making it easier to see, or even different collection teams as well. You can dive directly into a customer record and be able to see high-level information. Again, all of this data coming over from Sage Intacct. Tagging makes it super easy for customers to, or for a supplier to be able to segment their customers for reporting purposes and things like that. We also show whether the user has opened up the invoice. So making sure that you are getting that invoice into the right hands. All of that is going to be visible here as well. And with over 100 different notifications, you can proactively send out statements, dunning notices, reminders that an invoice is coming due, and all sorts of other notifications that let a customer and a supplier know how disputes and things like that are managed and handled. As I mentioned, all this data flows back into Sage from a reconciliation perspective. So creating that cash receipts journal and tying all of that back over into Sage, making it, again, super easy to do that end of month reconciliation. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing here and handing it back over to Derek.
All right, great. All right, so quickly, let's get through this. We got a few minutes. So I want to talk to you quickly about North Atlantic International Logistics. This is a company, they are a Sage customer. They do about 1,200 invoices per month, a logistics company. They ran into some issues, and some of the challenges, slow, highly manual AR system, waste of staff time, hampering cash flow, and no prepayment options, or very little prepayment options to take the prepayments from customers. So we looked at some of what they're doing in the manual work and the disconnect between their company's dispatch system and their accounting system software, requiring staff to do a lot more manual work in spreadsheets, and they needed to get that fixed. They also had issues with cumbersome communication. About 3% of their invoices that North Atlantic sent out were reported by customers not being received, so they needed to get that fixed. And the third is they had slow payment processing, so the system is slow paced, was not practical for a problem that North Atlantic to expand into the shipping and rail industry, which has really tight time frames for payments. So this is something that they were having issues with, and they need to fix that. Insufficient functionality, so they were lacking some functionality with their existing systems. The difference in delivery time billing systems leading to invoices and collection complexities that needed to be digitized. So what they did is looked at VersaPay. They really loved what VersaPay had to offer, and they decided to use VersaPay and deploy that. What they got out of it was they were able to access another $10 million in untapped market. This is because they were able to that they just didn't have before, and they used VersaPay to help them do that. And one of the ways they were able to do that is to accept that prepayment. So originally they couldn't accept prepayments, but now they have this prepayment functionality, which led to a $10 million in revenue, reallocation of staff's time to do more strategic priorities instead of doing day-to-day mundane tasks, and better invoice management and customer experience. The customer really loved the portal and was able to use that for their benefit. They had the ability to serve new customers, and this is where they were able to go after more of these customers to get direct payments. So that totaled up $2.5 million in the first year of launching VersaPay, and then they predicted over the next couple of years they should be able to collect. They should be able to increase that revenue by $10 million, which is huge for that company. Improved customer experience. Customers can see what they owe and what they had paid for in the portal. So all of that interaction between the company was a positive experience for the customer. So VersaPay, again, what we do here for you, we unlock your accounts receivable, make it more efficient, and we are, I just kind of again reiterated the same thing, but let's open up for Q&A because I just want to make sure I am conscious of the time that we have here. And if you need anything, so please feel free to contact me. My email address is at the bottom. We also have LeatherPay, and then please contact the DWD sales folks there, and they'll be able to help you out and direct you to us. Any questions?
No questions at the moment, Derek. We'll hold on here for another minute or so and see if we have any. Again, I'll echo what Derek said. If anything comes up afterwards, feel free to reach out to us here at DWD. And if you show any interest in VersaPay, please let us know, and we can certainly get you in contact with the right people.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, for our third and final marketplace partner of the afternoon. For those of you who aren't familiar with Martis, they are a solution who is a great fit for organizations that have outgrown or have gotten tired of Excel-based budgeting. They also take a very practical bottom-up approach to budgeting, which a lot of our customers need. I like the balance between ease of use and sophistication when it comes to financial planning. It's really a scalable solution that can be made available to non-accounting managers. So with that said, if you're currently budgeting in Intacct and you're using maybe an import process from an Excel spreadsheet, Martis takes it one step further. So if you feel like you're getting to a point where you need to get a little more sophisticated, or maybe you want to pass your budget process out to maybe department managers, program managers, something along those lines, Martis is going to be a great help to you. So I'm going to focus primarily in the software itself. So you can see what it looks like and kind of what the process looks like from Martis. Martis is fully integrated. So what that means and what you'll want to know about that is any of your dimension codes, your GL accounts, all of those sync within Martis. So you don't have to worry about, well, I just added a new account. Is that going to show up in Martis? I added a new department. Is that going to show up in Martis? The great thing is there is a nightly sync, so you don't have to worry about if those are covered. It's just when. And so if, let's say, you need to add a new code and have it sync over automatically, there's a great updater tool here, and you can say, here's the list of departments or dimensions, excuse me, in my demo environment. I can sync those at any point in time, and it's going to go through and do that. So again, if the nightly sync doesn't cover everything and you add something in the moment, you can do that here in Martis. So one less thing to worry about. Martis also has a great financial reporting and dashboard package that's built in. Little to no customizations needed. If you do need to build custom reports and whatnot, they do have the report builder here off to the left. But I'm going to start here by the dashboard and reporting tools that are out of the box or canned. So as you can see here on my screen, I've got the dashboard selected at the top, and then you're going to see different panels down below. So we've got a monthly income and expense, monthly income, and I'm going to point out here on the monthly income one, you're going to see current year, prior year, and budget. So Martis is pulling in actual data from Intacct. So it's pulling in actual, so you can compare that to the budget right here in real time. So you've got that comparison, and then that's going to happen automatically. You don't have to worry about that. We've got some different pie charts down below. We've got income, top 10, and you've got the different accounts. If I hover over it, it kind of tells you a percentage breakdown. So 20% for service fees with a dollar amount to the far right of that. Down below, you've got account expenses, top 10, so you can see how the pieces of the pie are sliced as far as income and expense go. We then also have a monthly gain loss chart as well as a monthly expense, so you can see where those were current year actual, prior year actual, or the line across that's going to be our budget. So some great options right out of the box. You've got your filters at the top here. So you can change it, if you have a different ending date you want to see, if you only want to show certain months or a certain number of months, you can change that. We've got periods here. You can change it from months to years. You can also change the budget that you're presenting. So if you have different budgets, for instance, if you have a board-approved budget that you want to show, board-approved budgets, in my mind, means no changes whatsoever. You may also have an in-house or internal budget where you might make adjustments month over month. You can flip to different versions here and see how those are presented within the dashboard as well. Up here at the select report field, we've also got other options. So I'm going to go down to our next one titled income statement. So I'm going to automatically change here for me. This one's going to present our GL accounts on the far left, income down to expense. Across the top here, you're going to notice we've got actuals. Don't mind my dates here, it's a little dated, but we've got actuals across till we get to the far right, and then it shows our budget values. You can see a monthly variance, and then you've got year-to-date actual budget variance, and then we have our total budget or annual budget and what is remaining. So you've got all that information presented to you. The actuals, you can even drill down into them. So if I click here, it's going to open up another tab at the top for me. And then it's pulling this information in from Intacct. If we had any attachments on those entries, you can see what those are made up of. You have the coding to the right. So it gives you another level of detail there with that drill down functionality. Same thing with our annual budget. You can drill down into that and it presents that level of detail there for you too. If we change from months to years and click load here, it's going to show us 3 years by default, but you can go up to 12 years there, however many you want to compare. You can see it gives us our actuals and then budget. You can see a yearly variance, and then you can see basically year-to-date actuals through, in this case, December, budget through December, and then we get our total again to the far right. So you can change that. That's the columns field at the top. Change it from months to years there. Let's drop down to our next, let's show you the forecast here. So similar information here. What I want to show is how you can slice and dice the information. So up to this point, we've seen our GL accounts across the left, month over month across the top. We did switch that to years. You'll notice that I can switch the rows. So right now we're showing accounts. I can change this to an account category. So if you're familiar with Intacct, these would be similar to account groups. So your account categories are ways to roll up GL accounts. So right now you're seeing tuition, grant revenue, contributions, which may be made up of many accounts, and then we're seeing that combined together. So that's going to be our account category approach. We can also do a department view summary. So instead of seeing GL accounts across the left, we see our departments. You could also, if you're a grant-related organization, you might do this for grants to see how much money you might have coming in and then the expenses going out and what the budget to actual or forecast may be. If we take a peek at our monthly budget comparison here, this is going to be another option presented a little differently. You've got your months across left to right, but you'll notice that instead of seeing actual, and then getting to the budgets, this is presenting you the actual, the budget, the variance, and then a variance percentage month over month. So you can see that information side by side. And then we do have the department view summary toggled on still here, but we can change it back to GL account and reload that. Okay. Very easy to make changes to how the information is presented. You can have a multi-year budget to actual, and you can change your end date. So if we wanted to see additional detail, then we get 2021 and 2022 along with the total there. You can see all this information. You can see actuals, budget, remaining, and then percent remaining. And then one final report here. I'm going to do the monthly budget comparison. Oh, that's the one I had up there. This is just the ability to export it to Excel. So an income statement by dimension in Excel. If you want to do that, any of these can also be exported to Excel too. So running down the list here, those are all predefined reports, and you've got your dashboards. I'll jump back up to that. So those require no customizations whatsoever. You can add filters to them across the top like what we did. You can change periods and how they're presented, different budget versions, all that good stuff. And so that's going to be the financial package beneath the dashboard menu here off to the left. So that, with all that said, that's given you get your budget in there and everything's good to go. You can see all this information. Let's kind of jump to a little bit more of in the weeds and the setup. One other thing I want to mention as we go through here, depending on the users that you have, if you have department managers or heads, I should say, entering the budgets, you may not want them to see everything, right? You want them to be restricted to some extent. So I'm going to go into a user here and look at their permissions. So much like Intacct and the subscriptions, you could come over here and check off what they can and cannot see. You can even set up roles. So this role here, department with income, you can easily select it for a new user who's added. And then that predefines these boxes that are checked and unchecked here. The other thing you'll want to keep in mind too is the dimensions that are assigned to them. So departments, these will show with your dimensions once it's connected to your Intacct environment. And then for the specific user, Diana in this case, we can come out here and say, well, she's only going to be able to budget $299, anything beneath $299, and then also $300. So she's not going to see anything related to 100 or anything with a 100 level code. So that's by design. That's so that your department level users, program level users can budget what they need to without seeing other information that they shouldn't be seeing. So that's a little bit about the permissions. And then let's go up to the worksheets themselves. So when the users are assigned budgets, they're going to come out here to their worksheets. And since I'm an admin user, I'm going to see pretty much everything in the software, but theirs would be restricted to specific location, department, program, whatever you have it restricted by. And so they can see a snapshot of their worksheets they have assigned. If there's values already provided or already input, they can see the gain loss, they can see their target, what the difference may be, if it's locked, and so forth. The status, you can have approvals set. So if the department manager, Diana, who we were looking at before, maybe she's the person who's inputting it, or if she's the approver, once a budget is submitted, it can go on to one or multiple approvers, and then once it is approved, it will then become locked. So let's go ahead and jump into one of these worksheets here, and I click the pencil icon to edit it. It's going to show us our revenue or income accounts at the top of the portion here and the expense down below. Now, if I try to click in here, I can't actually make any changes, and the reason being is that's because the budget is locked. Now, if I wasn't an admin user, I wouldn't be able to change this, but we're going to go ahead and unlock this worksheet here. Now you'll notice that I can click into these values. I can then come in and change values as I need to. Now, if again, it was locked and they didn't have the proper permissions, there aren't any changes made after a certain date, something like that, they couldn't change this like I am right now. If we were creating a budget from scratch, maybe we don't have values populated in here, you've got a couple of options. So this little icon here, it is a calculator. You can click on that. That brings up our values that we have currently. And you can do different calculations here. So we could say we want to do an adjustment, and maybe this is a bad example. Let's jump down to one of our expense accounts here. We're going to let's look at conference fees instead. Okay. We're going to change this from that. We did additional amounts. We could say, let's increase January by 500. Say preview. You'll notice that my January increased by 500. And then if everything looks good, you can click save. One other thing you can do here is you can add notes. So if you needed a little more detail to what these budgets are for, let's say it's Orlando conference in January, you can add a note there, and we'll click save. You'll see when I hover over the January, it gives us our little note there, Orlando conference, that pops up. Okay. just to go over a few of the other adjustment types, some of these may be more like payroll expenses if you had biweekly, monthly, weekly, and that kind of touches on our personnel budgeting as well. We looked at the additional amounts. You could have specific allocations, which gets a little bit more technical, and you could have it allocated a specific way, maybe based on a statistical FTE or square footage or something along those lines. You can copy existing values, and then you have the burn rate option too. So a few options there. You can also simply just go ahead and populate whatever the values are here and then update them. Or like you saw, I came out here and just you can update them as you see fit as a user. And then we would click the floppy disk icon to the right and save that. We are looking at this existing worksheet already. The user does have the ability to add a line to this budget. So for instance, all of this was predefined when I came into it, but if the user needed to add a separate GL account for a new expense type, they could click add line here, select their expense account as they need it. They can assign the project, add line. Now you'll see license fees. Looks like I did have another one there, but it didn't have a project associated with it. So now we can start to define what those license fees might be. One other area I want to touch on here as we have time that kind of goes along with these worksheets. It's called a special purpose worksheet. So if you budget and you might have some calculations, for instance, let's go ahead and click on my special purpose worksheets. You can look at the rent allocation. You might have different memberships and subscriptions. This one here, if we look top to bottom, so this is taking square footage and rent to allocate. And then as we go down here, you'll notice that these don't actually place a value into the budget. It's more of an input to the calculation. So this here then is our rent allocation. So it takes the inputs and then does the calculation for me and then allocates it to a specific worksheet. So you'll see 100 general, 110 youth center, and then the particular account. So what that's telling me is it's taking this value and budgeting it to these accounts and this worksheet. All right, so if you have, could be rent, could be, we have another client that's using it for ticket sales. So you might have certain ticket sales that then get multiplied by a ticket price, and then that could be a form of income to your organization. That's just a basic example there. But that's what these special purpose worksheets are meant to do. It's to take the work out of, having this calculation in Excel and then inputting it into another spreadsheet and loading it into Intacct. This is all here for it to do the calculation for you and then automatically put it into a budget worksheet. So keep that in mind. The options are kind of endless when it comes to special purpose worksheets, and it really does do the work for you as opposed to having to keep many spreadsheets with this information. I know we're coming down to the last 5 minutes here, so I'm going to briefly touch on personnel budgeting, which is a large animal in itself. If you budget for personnel expenses, you probably know what that might entail. So I may not get to everything here, but if you have specific questions on it or Martis in general, feel free to reach out to me or Adam, and we can certainly answer those questions. I'm going to touch on the scenarios here. You can have multiple scenarios for personnel budgeting. Maybe you want to input your expenses as you know they might be for a year, and then you might want to input them to account for a 5% cost of living adjustment. Those are just two examples there. We're going to look at the positions tab here. This kind of gives us a snapshot of what the system is doing to an extent. So you have various positions within your organization. So we've got CEO, CFO. Maybe you're an organization with counselors and you have many, in this case 7. You then would assign those positions to an employee, or an employee to a position. Sorry, had that backwards. we're going to take a look at this counselor here, Mackenzie. Okay, with each employee, they also might have a variety of expenses. So in this case, Mackenzie has a salary, semi-monthly pay of $2,400. There might be a bonus, whether it be a flat amount or percentage associated. In this case, she has an anniversary bonus that might come into play. Employees may have health insurance, which could be a monthly expense, retirement match, Social Security taxes, Medicare. That is the employer portion that would be counted here. And then I'll just point out too, each employee may have like a home location department project that their expenses should be accounted towards. Those can also be allocated. So I say home as in this is their primary location department project, but you could then have their personnel expenses allocated based on square footage, hours worked in a specific place, and then have it, spread those accordingly. Let's take a look at some of these that may not be based on a flat amount. So you can see these that say use default. This, you can define a specific amount, or in this case, you would define the amount that Mackenzie might have. Anniversary, you could have a tier. So a tiered approach where like if they hit a certain milestone, they've been working for the organization for 3 years, they might receive a bonus that year, and you can account for it in the budget. So many things like that. Health insurance, I'll mention here. Let's actually go back out, and we're going to look at pay types just as we have a couple minutes here so you can see those, because I know personnel budgeting is an important piece to budgets. Health insurance typically uses coverages. So you might have those split out by employee only, employee and spouse, employee children, and employee and family. And then you can set those amounts for that current budget year, and then those get assigned accordingly based on the employee and their position. And let's look at the bonus percentage, what I was trying to show there. So here we have a tiered approach. Anniversary, months employed 13 to 24, they get a 2% bonus. Tier 2 gets a 3%. Tier 3 gets a 5%. So you can get pretty detailed on that. And again, Martis does this for you. It's not like you're having to do any math in a spreadsheet and then have it loaded into Intacct. And while I have a minute still, again, I'm just touching the surface on personnel budgeting. So if you have real complex scenarios, feel free to reach out to us. But once all the budget is completed and everything is done in Martis here, there is a button to push it over to Intacct. So it automatically does that. And then if mid-year you need to update it, you can update it without overwriting the existing budget. It just updates it. So that is the beauty of Martis. It works hand in hand with Sage Intacct. And it really does take away some of the manual stuff that many organizations are doing in Excel. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions. If not, we can round out our user group here today.
I don't see any questions at this point, Luke.
All right. Well, again, we thank everyone for attending, and those of you who stuck around for the full time here, we really appreciate it. I'll just go through a few things. The recording, you can look for that here in the next day or so. Any CPE, anybody who is remaining here and wants to receive CPE, please email Leah and just note in the subject line that it is for CPE. And before you sign off today, please take that survey and you get a chance to win the $25 gift card. So thanks everyone for attending, and reach out to any of us with questions. Thanks.